Chapter 921. Surrender. Atticus Blaine cast his gaze upon Graves, who remained silent. After a few moments of intense scrutiny, a peculiar glint flickered in Atticus's eyes. This was indeed an intriguing situation. At the joint review meeting to determine whether learning machines could enter the U.S. market, Truck Graves, the very person responsible for initiating this unexpected meeting, had not uttered a single word. Instead, he employed a clumency to shield his thoughts. Was there something he wished to conceal from Atticus? The true reason behind his recent resistance and his reluctance to meet before the review meeting? To be honest, Atticus still couldn't fathom why the man sitting across from him, Truck Graves, with his graying hair and sharply defined features that epitomized authority, harbored such animosity towards him. However, from the restrictions Graves imposed on himself, Atticus had formed some vague suspicions. Perhaps Graves was determined not to repeat the mistakes of his grandfather. Over half a century ago, when Percival Graves served as the director of the Magical Law Enforcement Department and Minister of Security for the Magical Congress of the United States of America, he had encountered the Dark Lord Gellert Grindelwald. Grindelwald had even impersonated him, infiltrating the Magic Congress, nearly exposing the wizarding world to muggles. This was a stain on the Graves family legacy. Given this history, it was reasonable for Truck Graves to feel disdain and even resistance towards a wizard of extraordinary power like Atticus. Despite Atticus's high standing in the international magical community, astute wizards could discern his modus operandi through his crisis management style, realizing that he was not entirely bound by rules. Consequently, Graves feared that, upon entering the American wizarding world, Atticus might misuse his magical abilities to achieve his own ends, possibly even subduing and controlling him. This was a logical assumption for those unfamiliar with Atticus, especially for a seasoned auror exercising due caution. Moreover, it was an indisputable fact that, on the outskirts of Berlin, without the knowledge of the German Ministry of Magic, Atticus had dismantled the Wiccan Party's operations, causing a commotion witnessed by many muggles. As someone responsible for the security and stability of the American wizarding world, Truck Graves would undoubtedly detest such actions. Therefore, Atticus had shown no anger towards the security department for confiscating his wand and assigning Amelia to monitor him. He might have done the same in their position. Of course, Atticus had not forgotten the clues provided by Narlac. When their eyes met, Atticus detected a deep unease and panic hidden in Graves' dark red eyes. Was Graves afraid of retaliation, or was he fearful of revealing the true state of his own body? The Minister of Security was indeed in a precarious situation. His body was like a cauldron of conflicting forces, his own magic, a chilling energy likely from dark magic damage sustained while vanquishing a vampire, the magic of unicorn blood, and the curse from consuming it. These forces intertwined and clashed within him, causing unimaginable pain. The only solution Atticus could conceive to address this complex ailment was to use a stronger power to seal all the magic within Graves's body. This might preserve his remaining life, but the cost he had to pay was yet to be determined. Grey Wes had become a squib, unable to wield magic any longer. Atticus Blaine, who hailed from a prestigious family and was an exceptional wizard, couldn't fathom accepting such a shameful fate for the latter part of his life. "That's right, Mr. Graves," Atticus said after a moment of contemplation. He intertwined his fingers, gazing calmly at Truck Graves. "The Department of Security has always been committed to safeguarding the American wizarding community and has been cautious about the use of illusion magic by learning machines, which can interfere with users' minds. Today, Atticus took a different approach to address the conflict between him and Graves regarding the introduction of learning machines into the American wizarding community. Politically, this was undoubtedly a victory for Atticus and a significant defeat for Graves. It was no surprise that this powerful man might become a laughingstock. However, Atticus was here for business, not to make enemies. Despite the grim outlook on Atticus's health and the possibility of not living long, he didn't want to be constrained by the influential Graves family. "I admire this kind of questioning and responsible attitude from a professional perspective," Graves acknowledged, as did Marcille and several seasoned officials in the conference room. They all understood what Atticus Blaine intended to convey. Atticus hoped to salvage some of Mr. Graves's dignity to prevent future obstacles for Graves and his family. So far, the review materials submitted by Mr. Brett Lupine to the Magic Congress of the United States of America do not include the construction drawings of the Magic Corridor, a core component of the learning machine. This is the machine's core secret, and we cannot disclose it. However, to show our respect to the Ministry of Security, Mr. Graves, you can assemble a team of experts proficient in alchemy. As long as they sign a confidentiality contract with me, I am willing to share the core secrets of the learning machine with them, allowing them to produce an objective and detailed evaluation report, Atticus stated calmly. Share the composition of the Magic Corridor, the core component of the learning machine? Remus, who had been diligently learning Atticus's methods for resolving issues, turned pale and nearly leaped from his seat. It wasn't difficult to deduce the structure of the learning machine through reverse engineering. By identifying the supply chain and purchasing one to dismantle, a wizard skilled in alchemy could reconstruct it. Remus was aware that attempts had been made to do just that. While managing the workshop, he had dealt with several cases of workers leaking secrets. The learning machine remained unique to their family because its core secret was still in their possession. Yet, to prove the learning machine's safety to the Ministry of Security, Atticus was willing to share the composition of the Magic Corridor. Even with a confidentiality contract, it didn't guarantee complete security. Atticus's sincerity was astonishing, momentarily freezing the thoughts of Marcille and the contemplative Graves across the table. However, as senior officials of the Congress, they quickly regained their composure. If Graves agreed to this, would Atticus Blaine be upset? An alarm bell rang in Marcille's mind. She couldn't tolerate any more disruptions in this matter, which was already a foregone conclusion. With her eyes slightly narrowed, Marcille unexpectedly. Atticus Blaine smiled at Graves and said, "The learning machine has been part of the European wizarding world for many years. Based on user feedback, it is completely safe as long as the frequency of use is monitored. I have full confidence in Mr. Blaine and Mr. Albus Dumbledore's expertise in alchemy. Isn't that right, Track?" Principal Dumbledore? Atticus narrowed his eyes. He had never disclosed that Dumbledore had assisted in the development of the learning machine. Was Marcille invoking Dumbledore's esteemed reputation to lend credibility? "It doesn't have to be that way, Mr. Blaine." Graves finally addressed Atticus after the meeting. His expression was tense, and he sat upright, speaking in a deep voice. Indeed, since the development and design of the learning machine have been supported by Mr. Albus Dumbledore, and Mr. Blaine is even willing to publish the composition of the Magic Corridor with the missing core, considering that this remarkable invention has been officially launched in various European markets for some time, without any serious incidents affecting its usage awareness. I can, on behalf of the Ministry of Security and the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, confirm that the Venus learning machine you developed and designed is a safe and harmless alchemical product. End of this chapter. Chapter 922, Expansion and Dealing with War. As soon as Track Graves' words were spoken, Remus exhaled deeply, feeling as though a heavy weight had been lifted from his chest. Yet, a wry smile crept onto his lips. Atticus Blaine's earlier remarks had seemed casual, but the workload they implied was immense. In the coming days, he and Atticus would likely be unable to leave New York. Having decided to authorize marketing for influential local magical families and workshops, their first task was to swiftly identify a group of qualified candidates under the guidance of the Magic Congress and the International Magic Cooperation Department. This process would undoubtedly involve many individuals, and the Cooperation Department might face internal conflicts of interest. Once the initial screening was complete, Remus would need to conduct background checks on these groups to ensure their trustworthiness. Fortunately, this step could be accomplished using the Goblin's intelligence network. The most challenging aspect, however, would be negotiating with these entities. They would need to discuss franchise fees for dealers, pricing for goods from workshops, technical guidance, patent royalties for those interested in localized production, export pricing of machine core components, and terminal retail prices. Remus, who was diligently learning while managing the workshop, was no longer a novice in business. He understood that none of these issues would be resolved easily, and each would present its own negotiation challenges. After the meeting, both parties shared their visions and positions on the future trade agreement. This included an interview with the New York Ghost and a meeting with Miss Sleck, Marcel White of the International Magical Cooperation Department, along with a few senior officials, to reach preliminary agreements on key issues. The hasty celebration cocktail party and the leisurely days before the meeting vanished like a dream, replaced by a multitude of tasks. When Atticus, Remus, and Amelia left the Woolworth building, the warm morning sun had already journeyed to the other side of the earth, and the bright moon was obscured by a layer of haze. Atticus glanced at Amelia, his relative, who was known for her heavy drinking. At the earlier reception, she had joined him in toasting with the sociable officials of the International Magical Cooperation Department. Even after the meeting, she was still slightly intoxicated. "Has Graves given you any new instructions, Amelia?" Atticus inquired. "Mr. Graves?" Amelia's frail body swayed as her head spun. The dim streetlight highlighted her flushed cheeks. The alcohol had stripped away her usual sophistication and calmness, revealing a young woman in her early 20s. Blinking her watery eyes, she shook her head playfully in response to Atticus's question. Graves hadn't instructed Amelia to terminate the mission? Atticus raised an eyebrow in surprise. It seemed the chief officer of the Ministry of Security remained cautious of him. The issue that had troubled him for half a year had finally made significant progress. Even Remus felt a bit lightheaded. Under the influence of alcohol, he walked with a spring in his step, humming a tune by the Weird Sisters. Atticus smiled at Remus, contemplating for a moment. "Remus, during today's preliminary consultation with the International Magic Cooperation Department, there was a crucial point I didn't mention. It concerns a vital aspect of sustainable profitability in the sales system we're planning to establish." "What is it?" Remus asked, intrigued. "Many." The question towards Atticus Blaine, her voice barely above a whisper. The chill in the air seemed to seep into her bones, but her curiosity and concern kept her rooted to the spot. Atticus turned to face her, his expression softening slightly. "Amelia, the threat is real and we must be prepared. Voldemort's influence is spreading, and we cannot afford to be caught off guard. The funds we gather from these ventures will be crucial in fortifying our defenses and supporting those who stand against him." Amelia nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Her mind raced with thoughts of the challenges ahead, but she felt a sense of resolve building within her. "Then we must do everything we can to ensure the success of this endeavor," she said, her voice gaining strength. Remus, who had been listening intently, chimed in. "Atticus, I will begin preparations immediately. We need to secure our position in the American market and expand our reach to other magical communities. The sooner we establish these connections, the better equipped we'll be to face whatever comes our way." Atticus smiled, a rare sight that brought a glimmer of hope to the group. "Thank you, Remus. Your dedication is invaluable. Together, we will navigate these turbulent times and emerge stronger." As the night deepened, the trio stood in silent solidarity, each lost in their thoughts, but united by a common purpose. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but with determination and cooperation, they were ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. Her face, beautiful and youthful, took on a slightly childish tone as she spoke. "The Voldemort you're talking about, I heard of him while studying at Ilvermorny. It's said that he was completely defeated by the famous Harry Potter. Is he truly back in your magical world?" Remus remained silent for a moment before replying, "Indeed, he is." Atticus Blaine smiled, a hint of gravity in his expression. "The war is igniting and will soon spread to other countries. Our battle with Voldemort has already begun. No one, not even I, can guarantee survival in this war." Amelia was momentarily stunned. She watched Atticus as he walked ahead, his figure appearing frail under the street lamp's glow. An unexpected wave of concern washed over her. She recalled the comforting warmth that had flowed from her wand to her palm when Atticus had borrowed it, a warmth that felt as if they were bound by blood. "What's wrong?" Atticus, now some distance away, noticed Amelia had stopped. He He turned, looking curiously at the girl standing dazed by the lamppost. "Oh, it's nothing," Amelia replied hastily, her voice tinged with panic. She quickly trotted to catch up with him. End of this chapter. Chapter 923, I Am Different from Others, Brooklyn, New York. The No-Maj taxi carrying Atticus Blaine and Amelia drove eastward after crossing the Brooklyn Bridge, which connects Manhattan Island and Brooklyn. After traveling along the East River for 10 minutes, it turned west and passed a road lined with lush sycamore trees, finally stopping at an elegant and quiet street. The refreshing evening breeze of the first night lingered in the spacious and clean streets. The dim yellow light cast by the street lamps highlighted the light brown exterior walls of the not particularly tall but grand antique buildings on both sides of the road, giving them an elegant style. There were not many pedestrians on the road, only the occasional No-Maj patrons appearing at the high-end restaurants and hotels located along the roadside. Atticus observed a few No-Majs who got out of a limousine and quickly walked into a hotel. His eyes returned to wander around the area. "Is there an ambush?" he wondered aloud. Seeing his cautious demeanor, Amelia pursed her lips nervously and swallowed. Regarding the invitation letter handed to Atticus from the Muggle world, he had finally decided to attend the banquet. Although Remus did not agree with Atticus's decision, he could not change his mind. The preliminary cooperation plan drawn up with Makusa left Remus with no time to spare, and after Atticus informed him that the expansion of the workshop was even related to their battle with Voldemort, Remus did not dare to take it lightly. He had to devote himself wholeheartedly to his work and carry out what Atticus instructed. Therefore, he could no longer accompany Atticus to this very suspicious and equally dangerous invitation. At his insistence, Atticus agreed to take Amelia with him. It wasn't that Remus expected Amelia to protect Atticus if he encountered danger, but at least in critical moments, Amelia could provide her wand. Well, after looking around, Atticus shook his head and said in a brisk tone, "No, everything looks normal. However, the environment here is really nice. I think it is very suitable for a date." Amelia, whose drunkenness had long since dissipated, returned to her usual stoic expression. After spending some time with Atticus, she had grown accustomed to the occasionally out-of-character behavior of this internationally renowned magician. She was convinced that Atticus was not teasing her, because as a girl with an extraordinary appearance, from childhood to adulthood, she couldn't remember how many boys she had faced. Being able to clearly feel the kind of emotions a boy has towards her is not a great skill for girls with delicate emotions. It can be done without magic. Amelia couldn't detect the slightest bit of charm in Atticus's words. After walking for a while, Atticus and Amelia arrived at the agreed-upon location. The cafe mentioned in the letter was not like the small street cafes Atticus had seen on the streets of Paris and Bologna. It was very exquisite and luxurious. When he opened the door, a strong aroma of coffee hit his nostrils, which made Atticus, who didn't particularly like this drink, raise his eyebrows in surprise. The cafe, about the size of 2 or 3 classrooms, was bathed in a unique iron grill ceiling. The strands hanging from the ceiling were shrouded in the soft yellow light emitted by incandescent bulbs under retro glass lampshades. On the small stage opposite the main entrance, a tall, graceful Muggle girl in a light blue dress was playing a soothing and melodious piano piece. Amelia pursed her dry lips and scanned the few customers in the cafe with vigilant eyes, trying to determine which one had written the letter to Atticus. "Hello, sir, madam." A waiter approached with a trained, refreshing smile. "How can I serve you two?" The Muggle waiter asked politely, though there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. The people who could come and go in such a place were not the usual clientele. The neighborhood was filled with elites and high-end individuals, all impeccably dressed and exuding luxury. However, the young man and woman standing before him, who appeared to be a couple, were dressed quite ordinarily, yet there was something uniquely striking about them. The young man's demeanor suggested he wasn't just a curious passerby who had wandered into the store. "We've already reserved a spot," Atticus Blaine said in a soothing, low voice. "Let me think. Yes, it should be table 14. "Okay," the waiter replied, concealing his slight skepticism. He bowed and led Atticus and Amelia to a table behind a large, distinctive model of a medieval sailing ship near the cafe. Amelia accepted the menu from the waiter, flipped through a few pages, wrinkled her nose, and muttered under her breath, "Too expensive." "It doesn't matter," Atticus said nonchalantly. "Order whatever you like. We won't be the ones footing the bill anyway." Amelia's mouth twitched slightly, and she obediently ordered 2 cups of geisha coffee and some exquisite desserts. Melodious piano music filled the air, and the few guests scattered around the cafe spoke in hushed tones. The vast space was enveloped in a serene quiet. "The person who invited you hasn't arrived yet?" Amelia asked, feeling slightly out of place in the elegant surroundings. Although she was a wizard, she came from an ordinary Muggle family. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was about 10 minutes to 8. Atticus nodded. "As you can see, the customers and waiters here are all nomads. We're the only wizards. But why meet here?" Amelia peered through the sails of the massive ship model at the guests seated a few tables away. A faint unease settled in her heart, though she couldn't pinpoint its source. "If you're asking for my opinion," Atticus said, taking a sip of the complimentary floral tea. The sweetness made a vein throb on his forehead. "It's just in case." Before Amelia could inquire further, Atticus elaborated. "Those missing 5X-level magical creatures have left the Department of Security stumped for months. Mr. Newt Scamander mentioned that the perpetrator left no traceable clues, so how could a whistleblower suddenly emerge for such a flawless crime unless he's involved in the crime?" Amelia's eyes widened, her voice tense. Atticus nodded slightly. "That's what I think. The person who invited me likely anticipated that I would deduce this. To avoid falling into my hands or being reported to the security department, he chose a no-maj location for our meeting. It's not unexpected." Atticus glanced around casually, then continued. "This cafe, along with nearby restaurants and hotels, caters to individuals of status in no-maj society. If the meeting doesn't go well, such an environment would make me cautious. After all, these influential no-mages wouldn't understand the implications if he were to die. The impact on no-maj society would be significant." "Despicable criminal," Amelia muttered, her eyes filled with disdain. "Perhaps," Atticus replied calmly. "I suspect this person might be in some sort of trouble. Meeting Atticus Blaine is a risky endeavor, yet he insists on it. He must be facing considerable difficulties." The piano music in the cafe reached a crescendo before concluding. The sudden, passionate melody silenced the whispers, and all eyes turned appreciatively toward the girl at the piano. As the music abruptly ceased at its peak, only the lingering notes remained. The girl, with an elegant grace, stood up from her seat, a smile gracing her delicate features. She leaned forward. She expressed her gratitude to the audience, who applauded her performance, while her gaze drifted into the distance. When her eyes landed on Atticus Blaine, she seemed momentarily captivated by his striking appearance and remarkable demeanor, causing her to lose focus for a brief moment. Atticus, too, applauded the young woman's impressive skills, nodding and smiling in acknowledgement. After witnessing this exchange, and as the girl retreated to the inner room to rest, Amelia walked past a group of reluctant men gathered in the coffee shop. She suddenly inquired, "Do you guys fancy girls like her?" "What?" Atticus responded, momentarily taken aback before regaining his composure. "Oh no, I don't concern myself with others' preferences." The rhythmic chime of the wall clock echoed through the room as the coffee shop door swung open. Atticus glanced over, his demeanor shifting to one of calm anticipation. "The person we've been waiting for has arrived," he announced. End of this chapter. Chapter 924, Atticus's Arrogance. When Amelia heard this, the vague sourness in her heart immediately dissipated. Her sharp gaze suddenly shifted to the door, and upon seeing who entered, her delicate eyebrows furrowed. The man who walked into the coffee shop was a lean, middle-aged figure, clad in a peculiar black jacket with an unconventional lip stud beneath his lip. Amelia was certain her eyes weren't deceiving her. This man seemed to share the same out-of-place aura as the coffee shop itself. He was a no-maj, devoid of magical powers. She glanced at Atticus Blaine in confusion, but he sat calmly, waiting for the person who had invited him. The waiter in the coffee shop was also taken aback by the guests' attire and aesthetic choices. However, Upon hearing that the guest had made a reservation and requested a specific table number, the waiter suppressed his disdain and dissatisfaction, serving him politely. The guest indicated the table where Atticus and Amelia were seated, but did not personally guide him. The No-Maj man, dressed in hip-hop fashion, ignored the curious glances from other patrons. He scanned the room warily, then looked in the direction the waiter had pointed. However, his view was obstructed by a large sailboat model, preventing him from seeing beyond it. After assessing the situation, the No-Maj man pursed his lips and walked briskly toward them. He stopped 20 feet away from Atticus. Upon recognizing the world-famous face, the No-Maj man's eyes narrowed, but he secretly exhaled in relief. However, when he noticed the young lady sitting opposite Atticus, his expression turned sour. As the No-Maj man scrutinized Atticus and Amelia, they were also evaluating him. Hostility was evident in Amelia's eyes. For someone suspected of involvement in the case of missing magical animals, her instinct was to arrest him immediately and send him to Congress for interrogation. Atticus, on the other hand, observed the unfamiliar Muggle man with a penetrating gaze that seemed to see right through him. Then, as if realizing something, his eyes cleared. "Oh, it's you," Atticus said calmly. His words left both Amelia and the inviter momentarily stunned. Although the latter didn't grasp the full meaning, he became noticeably more alert. "If I remember correctly, Mr. Blaine," the man said in a hoarse, nervous voice, "I only invited you. This young lady wasn't part of the invitation. Who is she?" "Amelia Dett," Atticus replied, leaning back into the sofa, his fingers interlaced on his knees, "an auror sent by the security department of Makusa to ensure my safety." Upon hearing the mention of Makusa aurors, the veins on the man's forehead bulged. He glanced at Amelia, who met his gaze with a cold expression, and resisted the urge to flee, his breathing quickening. "This sounds like a joke, Mr. Blaine. You are the most powerful wizard of our time. You don't need anyone to keep you safe. You should be aware that security has seized my wand." "But you subdued a poisonous leopard with your bare hands," the No-Maj man retorted, falling silent for a moment before addressing Atticus again. "It doesn't seem sincere that you brought an auror from the security department to meet me." "Sir, how can I help you?" a waiter asked, passing by the No-Maj man and looking at him with mild confusion, unsure why the guest was lingering at the entrance. "No," the No-Maj man replied, taking a deep breath before finally heading toward the table he had reserved, without turning back. Amelia was about to stand and offer her seat to the suspicious No-Maj, but Atticus gestured for her to remain seated. "You're not going to talk to. Why are you here today?" Atticus Blaine asked, his voice laced with disdain. The No-Maj man standing before him looked uneasy. After the waiter placed the dishes on the table and bowed out, the man remained awkwardly, speaking in a hushed tone. Atticus met his gaze, sensing the wizard's consciousness lurking behind those eyes. His expression was calm, almost indifferent. "You mentioned sincerity," Atticus continued, his voice cold and scornful. Without sparing the man a glance, he casually stirred the aromatic coffee before him with a silver spoon. "You seek my help, yet you use the imperious curse to control a Muggle to meet me. Is this your idea of sincerity?" "The imperious curse?" Amelia's heart raced as she realized the man before them was not the true wizard who had written the invitation to Atticus, but an innocent Muggle under the influence of one of the 3 unforgivable curses. She instinctively reached for her wand, but stopped, remembering they were in Muggle territory where magic could not be exposed. "Whoever you are, you will face justice," Amelia declared, her eyes cold as she stared at the No-Maj man. After a moment of silence, the man spoke in a low voice. "I've already been punished." He turned to Atticus, about to say more, but Atticus raised a hand, silencing him. "I won't engage with anyone hiding behind secrets," Atticus stated firmly. "If you wish to speak with me, release the Muggle and come to me yourself." The man's expression shifted, torn between fear and defiance. Atticus's commanding presence was overwhelming, even causing the chandelier above to flicker. "I'll wait for you for 10 minutes, Atticus added, setting down his cup with a dismissive air. "After that, I'm leaving." He gestured towards Amelia. "You have 10 minutes to enjoy these meals, Amelia. Don't waste them." Understanding his intent, Amelia began to eat, casting a cold glance at the No-Maj man. His face paled further, realizing Atticus's resolve. If he didn't appear in person, there would be no further communication. But the man hesitated, glancing at Amelia. If he revealed himself without securing a deal with Atticus, he risked capture and certain doom. 9 minutes left, Atticus reminded him calmly. The man weighed his options, knowing that staying in New York was a gamble with his life. "Please wait," he finally said, leaving the coffee shop hurriedly under the watchful eyes of the staff. "Aren't you worried he won't return?" Amelia asked, her concern evident once the man had left. "Don't worry," Atticus replied confidently, offering no further explanation. The 10 minutes seemed to stretch endlessly, filled with tension. Amelia bit her lip, her eyes darting to the door repeatedly. She couldn't fathom Atticus's confidence, but she knew this was a critical case for the security department, involving the pursuit of 5X-level high-danger biological criminals. She understood the gravity of the situation and the potential chaos if such magical creatures were unleashed. In a Muggle neighborhood, the consequences would be absolutely catastrophic. Amelia glanced at the wall clock repeatedly, her anxiety growing with each passing minute. The girl who had been playing music earlier reappeared in the hall, now dressed in a lavender gown. She gracefully approached a group of men who were applauding her performance. Just half a minute before the 10-minute deadline set by Atticus Blaine, a man wrapped in a gray coat burst into the coffee shop. Ignoring the waiter's inquiries, he rushed straight into the hall. His suspicious demeanor startled the girl at the piano, causing her to step back in fright. She accidentally bumped her arm against the corner of the piano, wincing in pain. "This gentleman!" a waiter exclaimed, assisting the girl back to her lounge while another waiter pursued the intruder, shouting angrily. "I'm here," Sato Ryuhei finally announced, standing breathlessly before Atticus and Amelia. He waved dismissively at the pursuing waiter. Atticus, recognizing the wizard with whom he shared a close bond, raised an eyebrow slightly. "Then, please take a seat," Atticus invited, gesturing towards a chair. End of this chapter. Chapter 925, Ambush, Part 1. Sato Ryuhei, a dark wizard notorious for at least 3 heinous crimes, had managed to infiltrate New York. Allegedly, he cursed congressional staff at the Immigration Department to evade detection, marking his entry as illegal. The Department of Security confirmed that the deadly leopard, which claimed the lives of many Muggles that night, was his creation. This act of smuggling rare magical creatures into New York, coupled with his use of the unforgivable curse to control innocent Muggles, resulted in catastrophic consequences. With these charges, Sato Ryuhei faced an inevitable death sentence. According to Amelia, Atticus Blaine should apprehend this vile criminal immediately, avoiding any further interaction. In the presence of the world-renowned legendary wizard, Sato Ryuhei appeared particularly uneasy. His fists, hidden beneath the table, were tightly clenched, and his eyes darted around, constantly monitoring Atticus's expressions and the surroundings. At the slightest hint of danger, he was prepared to apparate away. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Blaine. Please forgive my earlier rudeness," Sato Ryuhei said, nodding respectfully to Atticus. Despite the immense pressure, he protested, "But now that I've shown my sincerity, could you please allow this Macau auror to leave?" Amelia glared at Sato Ryuhei, while Atticus responded calmly, "Amelia is someone I trust. Her presence here is not an issue. Moreover, with all due respect, I don't believe you are in a position to negotiate with me as an equal." Did Atticus Blaine have a trusted ally within the Magical Congress of the United States of America? His dismissive attitude did not provoke Sato Ryuhei's anger. Instead, he considered it an honor that Atticus Blaine had accepted the invitation. What concerned Sato more was Atticus's trust in the young female auror. If his suspicions were correct, he took a few deep breaths and temporarily lowered his guard against Amelia. "Then tell me why you wanted to see me," Atticus said, as the dark brown coffee in his cup cooled. A spark from his fingertips reignited the warmth, sending curls of white smoke rising from the cup. He took a leisurely sip, his gaze fixed indifferently on Sato Ryuhei. After a moment of silence, Sato Ryuhei spoke in a subdued tone, "I hope to use your power to help me leave New York." Amelia's eyes turned icy with disbelief. It was absurd for a dark wizard, guilty of so many crimes, to expect to evade justice. Atticus remained silent, his gaze heavy on Sato Ryuhei. Realizing the audacity of his request, Sato bit his lip nervously. "I can solve the trouble you're facing, Mr. Blaine. I know you came to New York to promote the alchemy tool known as the Learning Machine, which has been overlooked by Truck Gray of the Department of Security. As I mentioned in my letter, I know who is poaching magical creatures. If you can resolve this major issue for the Department of Security with the information I provide, I believe Graves will be more open to your business." Amelia's eyebrows arched in surprise, her expression shifting to one of sympathy for the dark wizard. "Mr. Blaine?" she inquired. Atticus Blaine remained unmoved, contrary to Sato Ryuhei's expectations, which only heightened his unease. Desperate, Sato had approached Atticus, hoping for assistance. Yet, even after revealing his most valuable information, Atticus Blaine remained cold and indifferent. "Hunted?" Atticus Blaine tilted his head, his sharp eyes piercing through the barrier of Sato Ryuhei's coat, revealing his true condition. Longping never imagined his state could be so easily discerned. His eyes turned sinister, and he nodded slightly. "No wonder." Atticus remained calm. "I suspect the person pursuing you is the same one who traded the poison leopard with you. To evade capture, you likely hid in Muggle territory, cutting off information so thoroughly that you couldn't even buy a newspaper to catch up on today's headlines. Unfortunately for you, Mr. Sato, I've reached a preliminary agreement with the Magic the Congress, and the promotion of learning machines is no longer an issue." Upon hearing this, Sato Ryuhei's expression shifted. He was aware that the Magic Congress had organized a joint review meeting regarding the learning machine's promotion. However, he believed Blaine would not pass the review smoothly, given that Graves had obstructed the matter for so long and had shown such overt hostility towards Atticus Blaine. As these thoughts raced through his mind, Longping realized today's actions were a complete misstep. His body tensed, and the wand hidden in his sleeve slipped into his hand beneath the table. But, bang! Before he could act, Atticus's finger struck the table hard. Where his finger touched, a hidden, dark, cursed light flashed in Sato Ryuhei's frightened eyes. Suddenly, he found himself unable to move. Only then did Amelia realize the dark wizard was attempting to escape. She prepared to stand, but Atticus, seated beside her, held her arm down. "Don't panic, he can't leave," Atticus assured her calmly. "You intend to hand me over to the Magic Congress?" Despair filled Sato Ryuhei's eyes. At that moment, 2 new customers entered the restaurant. 2 tall young men in crisp suits appeared to have reservations. They dismissed the waiter who approached them and walked toward a middle-aged man on the other side of the large sailboat model. The man and woman leaned over, exchanged a few words, and then sat down. Atticus glanced at the guests at the table, his eyes narrowing before returning his gaze to Sato Ryuhei. "I'd buy my freedom with gold, Mr. Blaine." Though his body was immobilized, Sato Ryuhei could still speak, struggling and pleading. This request was absurd. The world-renowned Atticus Blaine would never cover for a criminal in exchange for gold. Moreover, his workshop had just entered the American magical world, and the learning opportunity promised unimaginable wealth. How much gold could Sato Ryuhei possibly offer him? After a moment of contemplation, Atticus asked in a soothing tone, "There's an organization behind you, isn't there? The danger level of the poison leopard is beyond what a wizard like you can handle, unless, like Mr. Newt Scamander, you're a master of magical zoology. But I doubt that's the case. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made any mistakes during the transaction." A trace of panic flickered in Sato Ryuhei's stiff eyes. He hadn't expected Blaine to probe this deeply. "You can choose to remain silent," Atticus continued, resting his fists on his chin, his gaze burning into Sato Ryuhei's eyes. "But you might not know that I'm quite skilled in legilimency. I even have some of the most potent veritaserum in my bag, crafted by a potion master, if you'd like to try it." Amelia's lips moved as she listened to Atticus interrogate the criminal, but she ultimately held her tongue. Realizing he was merely a fish on the chopping block, at the mercy of Atticus Blaine, Sato Ryuhei's resistance began to crumble. Sato Ryuhei finally surrendered, his resistance fading away. "You are right, Mr. Blaine. I do belong to an organization," he admitted, his voice lacking its usual vigor. However, as if a sudden thought struck him, he quickly added with urgency, But we are not like those witch sects that perform dangerous experiments on muggles. Our activities are limited to the smuggling of magical creatures. End of this chapter. Chapter 926, Ambush 1. Amelia couldn't help but feel amused as she observed the frightened Sato Ryuhei. She knew he was terrified of Atticus Blaine's ruthless methods, which had dismantled organizations like his, just as he had eradicated those vile wizards who experimented on muggles. Yet Sato's excuse seemed absurd. Wasn't smuggling magical animals a violation of the law and a heinous crime? However, the dialectic of this issue would have to wait. Amelia's primary concern was discovering who was receiving these magical creatures, their purpose, and the whereabouts of the high-risk magical creatures that had been trafficked. Amelia glanced at Atticus, hoping he would ask these pressing questions. This must not be your first transaction, she thought. But for some reason, Atticus was taking his time. He pondered, sipping his coffee and nibbling on some cake before finally continuing his inquiry. You guessed it right, Sato Ryuhei replied, his tone tinged with humiliation. We've conducted many transactions over the years. Initially, they involved less dangerous magical creatures, but in larger quantities, they have always been our biggest clients. Recently, their demands have become more sophisticated, seeking high-risk, rare magical creatures. You know, dealing with these creatures is very risky, but they are reputable and pay well, so we agreed to their request and went to East Africa to capture the poisonous leopard for them. This operation cost us dearly. Several members responsible for this line of business were killed by the Nangdu leopard, so I was sent here. Atticus paused for a moment, contemplating. Have you never wondered why these people have such a great need for magical creatures? Just then, a guest at a nearby table accidentally knocked over a teapot, hastily cleaning up the mess. Amelia glanced at the table, her brows furrowing slightly. Something felt off, but she couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. As she looked around, she was surprised to notice that while Atticus was conversing with the criminal who had surrendered, the cafe had filled up considerably, with 1/3 of the seats now occupied. The girl who had been playing piano music returned to the bandstand from the lounge and began a new piece. Even with Amelia's limited appreciation for music, she noticed the girl's performance had deteriorated, with messy fingerings and numerous wrong notes. Outside the spotless crystal glass showcase, the night seemed to grow darker, a fishy wind blowing, and a cold breath quietly filling the air. We don't know, Sato Ryuhei finally said after a few seconds of silence. We don't need to ask why they want magical creatures, do we? Mr. Blaine, we just need them to pay the gold on time. This wasn't a lie, and Atticus acknowledged it with a subtle nod. Certainly, Sato hesitated for a moment before continuing, we've speculated that these individuals buy these powerful magical animals to drink their blood. Drink their blood? Amelia's face turned horrified at the revelation. She screamed uncontrollably, her mind freezing for a few seconds. Then, a bolt of realization struck her. The people you're talking about buying these magical creatures are vampires? Do it! Sato Ryuhei was about to respond when a sudden change occurred. A young man near the door, who had just entered the coffee shop with a stern expression, shouted loudly. More than 20 individuals who had quietly surrounded Atticus and the others stood up swiftly, revealing themselves as vampires. A dozen wands were aimed at Sato Ryuhei, who had been brutally attacked by Atticus Blaine. The girl playing the piano screamed in terror and fled. Amidst the ear-piercing screams, the remaining vampires directed their wands at the electric lights hanging in the cafe. Bang! 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 The sound of shattering glass mingled with the chilling echoes of life-threatening curses. The cafe was suddenly plunged into a hideous darkness, with only streaks of green curse light rushing toward Sato Ryuhei, carrying a strong aura of death. His sudden turn of events left Amelia, who was still reeling from the revelation that the murderer was a vampire, frozen in shock. She didn't have time to draw her wand before the curse light approached. Sato Ryuhei, after a moment of shock, regained his senses. His pupils, constricted with fear, could only see the ominous green light descending upon him like a meteor. I thought you would be more patient. Atticus Blaine sighed softly amidst the sharp whistling sound, causing every attacking vampire to change their expressions. Just when Amelia and Sato Ryuhei thought they were doomed, a milky white light screen enveloped the three of them, blocking the deadly curses from all directions. Boom! The death curses that struck the light screen were instantly deflected. The large sailboat model displayed on the high platform was hit by several curses, flickered with bright fire, and then collapsed. The scattered cursed light ricocheted around, turning the luxurious decor of the cafe into chaos in an instant. "This is none of your business, Blaine." The spells, like a storm, struck Atticus's magical barrier, creating brilliant ripples like fine spring raindrops on a lake's surface. "None of my business?" Atticus stood up slowly, his calm voice tinged with a hint of chill. "But now that I know your details, don't I? Apart from killing people and silencing them, do you have any other good choices?" His words were met with silence amidst the sharp whistling of the cursed light. More than 20 vampires surrounded Atticus and his companions, determined to kill them. We need to." In just 10 seconds, cold sweat had soaked through Amelia's clothes. She looked in horror at the thin layer of the magic barrier, which seemed ready to break at any moment. Her voice was shriller than ever. "Get out of here quickly. We need support. This place has been blocked by an anti-apparition spell, and the outside space is isolated," Atticus replied calmly. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, the cafe window exploded, and another group of vampires flew in. One of them, with a slightly stronger aura than the others, unleashed a bloody curse light that struck Atticus's magic barrier like a battering ram, causing it to shake violently. Humph! Atticus's eyes narrowed slightly, and with a heavy snort, the magical world around them suddenly fell into turbulent waves. The creatures in the cafe felt the air being sucked out, leaving them faint and suffocated. The next moment, Amelia felt a bright sun rising beside her, its heat so intense it seemed to scorch her very soul. Atticus raised his palm, and the nearest vampire was suddenly engulfed in golden flames. In a single breath, the vampire was reduced to ashes amidst its miserable wailing. The flames did not extinguish, but transformed into a strange snake with flaming wings, astonishing all who witnessed it. The snake, only as long as an arm, moved with incredible speed, sweeping through the darkened hall like a fiery tempest. A golden lightning bolt flashed, and in the blink of an eye, it transformed the first wave of attacking vampires into blazing torches. Witnessing this scene, Sato Ryuhei was paralyzed with fear. If he could move, he would have slapped himself hard, questioning where he found the courage to ask Atticus Blaine to meet him. As Atticus surveyed the half-destroyed vampires, he frowned slightly. This highly efficient massacre did not deter the remaining vampires. These dark creatures seemed mentally prepared, as if they had planned to meet their end here. In the moment Atticus lost focus, the golden serpent raging through the cafe slowed, its lightning-like speed diminishing. A vampire, whose physical prowess far exceeded that of a wizard, seized this opportunity. This vampire, whose aura was slightly more formidable than the others, let out a piercing scream. As he did, blood-red flames erupted across his body, and he launched himself at Atticus's fierce fire snake. With a whoosh, the blazing firestorm surged, sweeping away the surrounding tables, chairs, and bench, as with the force of a tempest. Atticus narrowed his eyes, peering through the dissipating smoke. The vampire who had sacrificed himself was utterly destroyed, both physically and mentally, and simultaneously, Atticus's fierce fire snake had vanished. End of this chapter. Chapter 927. Repeatedly. Interesting. Atticus Blaine remarked calmly, observing the scene before him. It can actually extinguish the fierce fire. Is this a unique blood magic of your kind, vampires? A vampire with a captivating figure and equally enchanting eyes stepped forward from the group that had flooded into the cafe. With a smile, she taunted, "It seems that Atticus Blaine's magic isn't as unstoppable as we thought, right?" The defeat of the fiery serpent had bolstered the spirits of the remaining vampires. Atticus smiled, unfazed. He took a moment to survey the vampires filling the hall, then mused, "You've gathered such a large force to eliminate Sato Ryuhei and me. What secrets are you hiding behind your collection of magical creatures?" The female vampire swayed to the front of her group, her bright red lips curving into a smile as she chuckled, a sound as clear as a silver bell, designed to charm. She winked at Atticus and blew him a kiss. If you're willing to join us, all my secrets could be yours, she teased, biting her plump lower lip, her eyes full of temptation. Shameless, vile creature. Amelia spat, her shoulders trembling with anger. Her fury intensified when she noticed Sato Ryuhei, the man responsible for this chaos, gazing at the female vampire with a look of longing. She huffed in disgust. Ridiculous. Atticus shook his head, unimpressed. Even the natural allure of a pure vila couldn't sway a great magician like him, let alone a vampire with only a rudimentary grasp of charm magic. I'm not particularly interested in what you're doing with the blood of those magical creatures. I got involved to help Newt. Since you've shown yourself, you can explain everything to Newt and the Magic Congress. Atticus's expression turned cold as he extended his hand toward Amelia. After a moment of confusion, she realized his intent and quickly handed him her wand. The absence of his wand was the real reason these vampires dared to confront him here. As Atticus gripped the wand of the Mac Auror, an unspoken tension filled the room. The vampires, who had been so bold moments before, now felt an overwhelming urge to retreat. Any vampire familiar with the duel between Atticus Blaine and Vitia Cleona knew that sheer numbers wouldn't suffice against him. Just 2 months prior, Atticus had single-handedly subdued hundreds of skilled Wiccan remnants. Now, faced with Atticus, the decision to stay or flee was no longer theirs to make. With a flick of his wand, Atticus unleashed a palpable pressure that swept through the room. The once fearless vampires found their expressions shifting to fear. Despite their special blood magic and physical strength, they crumbled under the weight, falling to their knees before Atticus. The pressure was so intense that it shattered their leg bones, the white fragments piercing through flesh and pressing against the wooden floorboards. Blood trickled down, staining the dusty wood a deep crimson. The gruesome sight turned Amelia's face pale. She covered her mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. While such injuries would have rendered a wizard unconscious, vampires, with their underdeveloped pain-sensing nerves, felt no pain from their broken bodies. They merely appeared pitiful. Atticus, having witnessed countless scenes of carnage, remained unmoved. A swirling vortex of crimson mist above the darkened cafe. The once oppressive atmosphere shifted, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Atticus Blaine, unfazed by the chaos, stood resolute amidst the aftermath of the explosion. His wand remained poised, ready to counter any further threats. The female vampire, who had moments ago been a vision of allure, had transformed into a grotesque figure before her demise. Her skin had turned an ashen gray, her fangs elongated menacingly, and her eyes, once alluring, had become a deep, unsettling scarlet. Her final scream had been a piercing wail that reverberated through the cafe, sending shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it. Amelia, caught in the midst of this supernatural turmoil, felt her blood race through her veins as if it were being drawn out by an unseen force. Beside her, Sato Ryuhei, still recovering from his injuries, trembled violently. The blood from his reopened wounds seeped through his coat, staining it a vivid red. Atticus glanced back at his companions, his expression unreadable. With a swift motion, he aimed his wand at the female vampire, intending to render her unconscious. Yet before he could act, she exploded into a shower of flesh and blood, the remnants of her body dissolving into a luminous red liquid. From this pool of blood, chains of crimson energy emerged, snaking through the air with alarming speed. They lunged towards Atticus, who responded with a frown. A protective magic barrier materialized around him, encapsulating him in a dome of shimmering energy. The blood chains wrapped around the barrier, attempting to ensnare him, but they were held at bay. As the chains tightened, the oppressive weight that had filled the hall lifted, and Atticus found himself pinned to the floor. Miraculously, the injuries on his legs began to heal at an astonishing rate. The vampires, sensing a shift in the battle, hesitated momentarily before attempting to flee. "Think you can escape?" Atticus's voice, laced with a chilling whisper, echoed in the ears of every vampire present. A surge of power erupted from him, shattering the blood chains that bound his barrier. He surveyed the retreating vampires with a calm, calculating gaze. With a decisive flick of his wand, Atticus conjured a massive cage of golden flames that descended from above, ensnaring most of the fleeing vampires. Those who collided with the fiery bars were instantly reduced to ashes, their screams silenced before they could even begin. Amelia's face lit up with relief, but her joy was short-lived. The vampires trapped within the cage, realizing their fate was sealed, chose to end their lives rather than face capture. They hurled themselves into the flames with a frenzied determination, their bodies consumed by the golden fire. Even Atticus, accustomed to the brutal nature of vampire society, was taken aback by their unified, almost militaristic resolve. It was as if they were following some unspoken command, a grim testament to their loyalty or desperation. "Atticus!" Amelia called out, her voice tinged with confusion and fear. Atticus's attention shifted to the entrance of the cafe, where a new figure appeared, a vampire with eyes full of malice. He hurled a small, ebony coffin into the air, its silver plating glinting ominously. The coffin shattered upon contact with the flame cage, releasing a pool of blood that glowed with an ethereal red light. The blood expanded rapidly, extinguishing the golden flames and breaking through the ceiling, forming a swirling vortex above them. Atticus and Amelia exchanged a glance, their expressions a mix of determination and apprehension. The battle was far from over, and the true threat had only just begun to reveal itself. Above the heads of the three people stood a raging river of blood, swirling ominously. It was as if the sky itself had overturned, threatening to crash down upon them. Atticus Blaine's stern expression shifted subtly. This was only the second time his fierce fire had been suppressed. The first was during his pursuit of Sirius, whom he deemed a criminal, when he attempted to breach 12 Grimmauld Place and had a brief confrontation with Dumbledore. On that occasion, the flames he conjured were extinguished. Now, this river of blood, imbued with an extremely malevolent magic, was poised to descend. Atticus, with a solemn demeanor, raised his wand, ready to counter the impending threat. Just then, he felt a sudden warmth in his chest. Glancing down, he saw an object burst forth from his space bag, transforming into a blur as it soared towards the turbulent river of blood suspended in the air. End of this chapter. Chapter 928, Fangs. In the space confined by vampires, a raging river of blood floated, casting a crystalline red glow. At first glance, it seemed beautiful, but a closer look revealed something sinister. Each blooming blood flower burst with a painful human face, and if one listened carefully, faint screams echoed through the rolling waves, reminiscent of a ghostly wail. Even with her extensive magical knowledge, Amelia could discern that this river of blood was profoundly dark and evil. Her eyes were fixed on it, and her thoughts raced, leading Atticus Blaine to immediately understand why this river could extinguish his fierce fire. It was indeed troublesome and difficult to handle. This river of blood transcended mere magical power, involving a higher dimension. Ordinary methods were futile against it. To erase this river, a significant battle would be necessary. Atticus hadn't anticipated encountering such a formidable challenge on this journey, but he had no choice but to confront it. Just as he was about to act, he felt a sudden warmth in his chest that momentarily stunned him. Something transformed into cold white lightning, breaking through the space bag restricted by the traceless expansion curse, and shot straight into the sky towards the sea of blood. Atticus focused intently, his penetrating gaze piercing the barrier of the white halo. As he clearly saw the strange moving object, the surprise on his usually calm face intensified. It was a fang. The fang, resembling warm white jade, rushed towards the sea of blood and hovered midair, spinning. Under the astonished eyes of everyone, the white lightning on the fang flickered, and a strange power emerged, causing the space to tremble. Then the fang exuded a powerful attraction force. The evil sea of blood floating in midair formed a vortex under the assault of blood-colored thunder. The vortex quickly intensified, and a blood-colored tornado descended from the air, connecting to the fang, radiating white light, pouring in endlessly. Atticus's thoughts were stagnant for several seconds as he pondered the nature of this object. After Hermione was attacked, he had ventured alone into the underground wizarding world deep in Nocturne Alley to investigate clues about the curse. There, he found Virulence, a specialist in cursed items, and purchased vampire fangs for 40 gold coins. He had sensed an extraordinary power within them, albeit blocked and disguised by a clumsy curse. Atticus had intended to research it later, but the subsequent events, the cursed person's pursuit, the Longbottom's affair, Lawrence's summons, the second Triwizard Tournament, and Voldemort's resurrection left him with no time to breathe, causing him to forget about the Fang entirely. Atticus wasn't the only one shocked. Amelia, the prisoner Sato Ryuhei, and the acquaintance who had thrown the small black coffin all stared in disbelief at the Fang that had emerged from Atticus Blaine's body. The vampire Fang, like a ravenous beast, completely consumed the surging sea of blood in mid-air within a minute or two, leaving the sky above the cafe ruins suddenly clear. Buzz. After devouring the blood, the soft milky white halo surrounding the Fang gradually faded, and the white teeth became more crystalline and smooth, hovering quietly in the air. A long silence followed, as Atticus, Amelia, and the group of vampires who had narrowly escaped death all stared at the crescent-shaped Fang in awe. The Fang was a masterpiece, a work of art. That's what it is. Amelia was the first to break the silence, her eyes fixed blankly on Atticus Blaine. The Fang had emerged from Atticus's body, and Amelia assumed he was aware of its significance. "Take it back!" A decisive howl echoed through the sealed space, coming from the last vampire who had encountered Atticus. Those vampires, fortunate enough to have escaped him, did not hesitate. A shadow transformed into a bat, lunging for the Fang suspended in the air. Yet, their efforts were destined to fail. Suddenly, the pitch-black sky brightened, and a burst of light momentarily blinded the vampire, who instinctively shielded his eyes with his hands. Through squinted eyes, he glimpsed the sky. Starfall! Countless golden rays streaked across the space, descending like a rain of arrows upon the vampires who had taken to the air to reclaim the Fang. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! Amidst the shrill screams and agonized wails, all but one of the dark creatures present that night were reduced to dust, leaving behind only ruins and burning golden strands. A cross stood like a funeral tombstone. Almost instantly, the vampire cohort was annihilated. Atticus turned his gaze to the remaining vampire. His cold stare caused it to retreat instinctively. But before it could attempt an escape, its body was lifted and propelled forward, landing before Atticus. Under immense pressure, it collapsed to its knees, bloodied and defeated. "Well!" The vampire emitted a sound of anger and defiance as Atticus toyed with the fallen Fang. "It is." Everything finally returned to calm. The recent events had nearly overwhelmed Amelia's ability to think. She stared blankly at the sinister-looking vampire before her, gasping, "It is, if I remember correctly." "I believe you do," Atticus interjected, momentarily shifting his gaze to the wretched vampire. "You are Narlac's subordinate, the waiter at the Blind Pig Bar, correct? We've met before. What is your name?" The vampire remained silent, glaring at Atticus with hatred. "How did you find me?" Sato Ryuhei, who had been frozen in shock, finally stood and asked the question that plagued him most. "It was the girl who mentioned the piano," Atticus replied, glancing at the unconscious girl amidst the ruins. "She's a squib, serving you, isn't she? Seeking the first embrace of a vampire." The term "squib's first embrace" flashed through Amelia's mind, and she asked in surprise, "The first embrace of a vampire can grant a squib magical power?" "There is indeed a possibility," Atticus answered calmly. "As far as I know, there's a slim chance that squibs can access magic through the first embrace, using certain vampire secrets. However, the hope is faint. Moreover, to sustain even a thin magical power, they must feed on the blood of living beings, much like vampires." Amelia glanced at the strikingly beautiful girl, her expression a mix of disgust and sympathy. "You recognize this Fang?" Narlac's vampire waiter glared at Atticus with hatred, though Atticus sensed that its animosity was often a facade, more concerned with the Fang's storied past. With a commanding presence, Atticus lowered his gaze. "And what about that pool of blood you just discarded? Where did it originate?" The vampire remained resolute in its silence, determined to withhold information, even at the cost of its life. But some outcomes cannot be dictated by sheer will alone. Atticus Blaine gently waved his wand, causing the immobilized vampire to levitate from the ground, forcing it to face the light of his torch. Morgans, aware that he was about to confront the legitimacy of a powerful magician, remained unfazed. He had prepared a spell in advance that would erase his memories if Blaine attempted to delve into them. The only regret Morgans harbored was that his own reckless actions had shattered his dreams of success. As Atticus prepared to enter the vampire's mind, he suddenly narrowed his eyes, shifting his gaze to the endless darkness that enveloped the space around them. "Just in time," Atticus murmured. In the next moment, the black veil sealing the space was torn apart, revealing Graves' solemn face to those present. End of this chapter. Chapter 9 and 29, Shared Origins. Graves was not the only one to appear. A large group of Aurors followed him through the barrier, entering a room that had once been luxurious and elegant. Now it resembled a ruined Muggle cafe, and their eyes widened with undisguised astonishment. "Mr. Graves," Amelia exclaimed, rising from behind Atticus Blaine. She hurried over to Graves and her colleagues, her voice tinged with surprise. "Why are you here?" "Why am I here?" Graves retorted, his lips tight. A flash of green energy crossed his face as he struggled to contain his anger. "That's a ridiculous question, Miss Det. Do you realize that you're in No-Maj territory?" The No-Majs nearby noticed that the building, which had stood here for years, was suddenly engulfed in darkness. What do you think they'll do when they see monsters that suck human blood inside? Amelia opened her mouth to explain, but Graves had already shifted his gaze from her to Atticus. His eyes held a knowing look, as if he had anticipated that Atticus Blaine would eventually cause trouble. "The Aurors from the security department have evacuated the nearby Muggles and established a safe zone. We've also stopped the Muggle reporters who came to investigate," Graves continued, his voice no longer restrained. "But Mr. Blaine," he said, fixing Atticus with a piercing stare, "you owe me a perfectly reasonable explanation for this." Graves surveyed the surrounding ruins, his face livid. "Explain what happened here. How should I define this event, and why did you use your wand without permission?" Graves seemed so incensed that he momentarily forgot the wizard before him was Atticus Blaine, the vice president of the International Federation of Wizards and a key trading partner who had just reached a business agreement with the Makusa International Magical Cooperation Department. Atticus remained calm, understanding the pressure Graves, the head of the safety department, was under with the recent public scrutiny. "Please calm down, Mr. Graves. I can explain everything," Atticus said with a reassuring smile. He released his wand, allowing it to float back to Amelia's hand. "Shall we discuss this here, or should we return to Congress first?" Atticus's composed demeanor seemed to quell Graves's anger slightly. After a moment's hesitation, Graves turned his attention to the vampire hovering nearby, then shifted his gaze to the slumped, Asian-faced man behind Atticus. "Sato Ryuhei?" he murmured, his eyes narrowing as he refocused on Atticus. "Let's return to Congress, Mr. Blaine. You have a lot to explain." It promised to be a long, tumultuous night. Atticus spent nearly the entire night at the Capitol, addressing the Ministry of Security's inquiries. He clarified the situation without breaching the wizarding statute of secrecy or the laws set by the Magical Congress of the United States of America. As for using his wand without permission, given the threat to his life and the emergency circumstances, it was a minor issue. Despite the licensing dispute over the sales of learning machines, which had embarrassed Graves, Atticus suspected Graves might seize the opportunity to create obstacles for him. However, in reality, Atticus Blaine was indeed furious. After learning about the invitation, Amelia chose not to inform the security department and instead accepted it, leading to a fierce confrontation. Sato Ryuhei was taken in by the Ministry of Security, and the remaining vampire was also detained. Atticus informed Graves that the vampire, Morgans, was a sommelier at the Blind Pig Bar. The Blind Pig Bar is frequented by many wizards from the underground world. "I believe the security department will have no trouble verifying his identity," Atticus remarked, reclining on the sofa in Graves' office after taking a brief respite. Graves, who had looked troubled all night, listened to Atticus's words. A flicker of realization crossed his eyes. These vile vampires, these dark creatures, never learned to coexist peacefully. They're all under Narlac's control. Thray, a detestable goblin, has been providing refuge to underworld wizards for years. If anyone has the power to do so, it's him, cunning fellow. The Blind Pig Bar has been shut down since last time, and Narlac has vanished. Atticus pondered how a place like the Blind Pig could have operated for nearly a century without the Ministry of Security's tacit approval, but he kept this thought to himself. "So," Atticus said, rising from the sofa, "I believe everything has been clarified. If you don't mind, I need to return to the hotel for some rest. I have another invitation to attend tonight." "What?" Graves frowned, standing abruptly from his desk and fixing Atticus with a stern gaze. "Another invitation, Mr. Blaine? Don't tell me." "Oh, don't worry," Atticus reassured him with a smile, aware of the director's apprehension. "It's from Amelia's parents. A few days ago, I visited Amelia at St. Josiah's Hospital for Magical Maladies. Her parents were there, and we met. They seemed to take a liking to me and invited me over for a potluck dinner." "Amelia's parents, you say?" Graves murmured, clearly surprised by this revelation. He seemed to consider saying something more, but meeting Atticus's clear gaze, decided against it. "You may leave, Mr. Blaine. I hope the rest of your stay in New York is uneventful." By the time Atticus returned to the hotel, dawn had broken. Remus had already left to negotiate with the goblins about the next series of talks. With the energy level of a great magician, going without rest for a few days was manageable. Atticus approached the desk, tidied the scattered materials, and searched his pockets. Soon, a crescent-shaped vampire fang, white as jade, lay in his palm. With a soft clink, Atticus placed the fang on the table, leaned back in his chair, and intertwined his fingers, focusing intently on the fang. After absorbing the strange blood, the fang appeared more extraordinary in both appearance and quality. Yet, it revealed nothing special beyond that. The power within it remained silent. Atticus reflected on the ball of blood the vampire had thrown the previous night. Its peculiar power had suppressed his magic and extinguished his fierce fire. Having mastered the pinnacle of Lee fire magic, Atticus realized that the blood's ability to do so indicated it contained a higher dimensional power, the power of the soul. The vampire to whom the blood belongs possesses not only the physical essence, but also the soul power of those it has mutilated. The collective resentment of countless victims, fueled by dark magic, has coalesced into a formidable force. The fact that the fangs can absorb this mass of blood suggests only one possibility. They share the same origin. End of this chapter. Chapter 930. A Battle Across Dimensions. The fangs shared the same origin as this peculiar mass of blood. Atticus Blaine vividly recalled that when Verolence sold him the fang, he mentioned it belonged to a formidable vampire from the 15th century. During that era, the Holy See's influence in the realm of extraordinary powers was formidable, and vampires were among the most significant heresies they had to confront. After subduing a vampire, the fangs were passed through many hands, eventually entering the magical world. Over centuries, under the protection of its descendants, its essence found its way to the United States. A cloud drifted in, obscuring the brilliance of the newly risen sun, and the bedroom where Atticus sat was plunged into darkness. He folded his hands under his chin, a hint of hesitation in his eyes. From the blood, Atticus deduced why the vampires hunted those high-risk magical creatures. They coveted the blood of these creatures, which contained high concentrations of magical power. Compared to hunting magical creatures, targeting wizards was far more conspicuous. Now that the vampires in Sato Ryuhei had fallen into the hands of the Magic Congress, this group of professionals would eventually uncover the vampires' plans. Even if they intended to resurrect any dangerous creature, their conspiracy would be thwarted. However, a faint feeling of unease lingered in Atticus's heart, preventing him from completely relaxing, despite his reluctance to meddle in others' affairs. The morning sun struggled through the clouds, casting a few rays of light green illumination through the gaps, which happened to shine on the crescent-shaped fangs. After a moment of hesitation, Atticus's eyes steadied. Regardless of what went wrong, this fang was worth investigating. With a slight movement of his fingers, the bright white fangs floated up in the breeze, suspended at a position parallel to Atticus's line of sight. In the next instant, his previously calm gaze turned sharp, and his sight pierced through the fangs, delving deeper. Click! Clang! The dim bedroom seemed to flash with thunder, and the air shook violently for a moment, causing the large, flexible floor-to-ceiling windows to tremble. In the void, countless streams of light flashed before Atticus's eyes, followed by the sea of blood absorbed by the fangs. In the space of this Sumeru ring, a sea of blood, exuding ominous crimson fluorescence, stretched to the horizon. Two dark purple moons suddenly appeared above the dark world, exuding a heavy majesty as they silently observed the many ferocious and hateful faces that flickered in the sea of blood. These were the faces of those who had lost their lives, their lingering resentment towards this vampire's existence, trapped in endless torment. As the light from the two purple moons grew more majestic, blood and thunder gradually intensified within the space inside the fangs, and the outline of Atticus's face gradually emerged in this realm. His immense spiritual power shook the space, causing the fang's domain to tremble, and the sea of blood below surged violently as if provoked. Thousands of faces howled and whined, their malice rising into the sky, transforming into billowing columns of black smoke. They surged high, attempting to expel Atticus, but to no avail. Finally, Atticus's complete visage emerged from the sea of blood, like a deity, gazing down with cold and empty eyes. Just as he was about to channel even greater spiritual power into the world of the fangs, the sea of blood below suddenly transformed. Under the influence of a mysterious connection, the turbulent and roiling sea of blood became transparent, fading into nothingness in an instant. Atticus Blaine's gaze penetrated the vast expanse of space, revealing a new scene before him. A dilapidated rotunda stood there, its surrounding walls faded and abandoned. Through the circular glass dome, the rolling green mountains outside were visible. In the center of the hall lay a pool, the size of a private swimming pool, which seemed oddly of place. Clearly, this pool was not part of the original design of the official hall, but was added later. The liquid within was not stagnant water, but blood, crimson, almost black, with a peculiar quality. This pool of blood was as thick as gel, expanding and contracting every few seconds, reminiscent of a fetal heartbeat. Atticus surveyed the intricately engraved magical corridors that lined the four sides of the pool, his gaze finally settling on the pool itself. As if sensing his scrutiny, the pool's fetal movements quickened, and bright lights began to flash rhythmically beneath the surface. This pool of blood was indeed extraordinary. Atticus's spiritual power, usually formidable, was unable to penetrate its depths. When he attempted to exert even greater spiritual force, without warning, a corpse floated to the surface. The body belonged to a man in his 20s, dressed in the attire of a middle-world aristocrat, with strikingly handsome features. His skin was beyond pale, resembling that of a fetus 4 or 5 months into gestation, translucent enough to reveal the silent heart within. Suddenly, the pool of blood surged violently. Atticus's intrusion seemed to have disturbed the vampire, not yet fully born or resurrected. In an instant, the vampire's eyes snapped open, revealing blood-red pupils that locked onto Atticus. The moment their gazes met, deep purple against blood-red, a violent hurricane erupted within the dilapidated hall. The force shattered the circular glass dome, and the surrounding walls cracked ominously. The mental shockwave caused countless tiny lightning bolts to flicker through the smoke-filled hall, and the recoil force sent the corpse sinking back into the pool. Atticus's mental strength nearly collapsed, dissipating with a cold hum. As his consciousness returned to his body, the fang he had been holding lost its power and fell to the ground. The desk in front of Atticus lay in pieces, shattered at some point during the ordeal. The room looked as if a typhoon had swept through, with the tempered glass window showing thousands of cracks, one corner hanging precariously from the frame. Atticus gently rubbed his temples, and after a moment, his vision cleared. He glanced down at the fang that had fallen into the cracks between the wooden floorboards, his eyes as deep as an abyss. In the blink of an eye, dusk approached, and the afterglow of the setting sun faded, while the red sun in the sky hurried to bring light to another continent. A mournful sound of electricity buzzed from a nearby telephone pole, and a light bulb, covered in dead mosquitoes, flickered before settling into a steady glow. "Honey," called Mr. Det, standing by the mailbox. He glanced at the lit streetlights, his toes unconsciously scuffing the ground. He took a few quick breaths and looked at his daughter beside him. "Are you sure he will come?" Mr. Det asked for the 11th time that day. "I believe Atticus will not lose track of time," Amelia replied confidently. Amelia pursed her lips, her gaze drifting to her father's anxious expression. A strange feeling welled up inside her, growing more intense by the moment. Her parents' curiosity about Atticus Blaine had clearly surpassed normal bounds, reaching a level she couldn't quite comprehend. So, will he be using your wizard's disapparation skills? Or perhaps the fireplace, like your mother and I did when we last visited you in the hospital? Her father inquired. Despite having explained this several times today, Amelia remained patient. He can't apparate, Dad. One of the conditions for apparating is that you must have been to that place before. Atticus has never visited our home. As for the fireplace, the last time was a special situation. Under normal circumstances, fireplaces in no-maj homes aren't connected to the Flu network. That's a privilege reserved for some high-ranking members of Congress. So, Mr. Depp began to ask again, but a speeding taxi rounding the corner interrupted him. I'm sorry, Mr. Depp, and thank you for your kindness, Atticus, holding a bottle of whiskey as a gift, said as he stepped out of the car. He saw the old man approaching him happily, adjusting his tie, and offered an apologetic smile. Oh, what are you talking about, child? We won't start eating for a while. Before that, you can take a look at the gift we've prepared for you, Mr. Depp replied with a smile. He wrapped an arm around Atticus's shoulders and led him into the house with affection, leaving Amelia standing at the door, watching the two men walk away with a sense of confusion. End of this chapter. Chapter 931, Family Banquet. As night descended, the homes in the residential area began to light up one by one. While not as dazzling as the neon lights of the bustling commercial district, the glow from these homes exuded a comforting warmth. The Depp family's small house bore a striking resemblance to the home Atticus Blaine had visited, the Dursleys. This was hardly surprising, as the elderly couple had spent most of their lives in London before moving to New York, and they retained their British lifestyle. In the dining room adjacent to the kitchen, a genuine family gathering was underway. Of the 4 people present, 3 shared a silent understanding. Only Amelia seemed out of place, watching her parents chat animatedly with Atticus, feeling like an outsider. Her gaze fell on Atticus's left hand resting on the table beside her. A new watch adorned his wrist, a gift from her parents that she hadn't been aware of. It was a present prepared by Star. Although Amelia's life now leaned heavily towards the wizarding world, her understanding of the no-maj world remained intact. Her parents' gift to Atticus was extravagant, equivalent to her annual salary at the Magic Congress. It was a gesture that defied social norms. Amelia was taken aback when her parents presented the gift. What surprised her even more was that she expected Atticus to decline such an expensive present. Yet, after a brief pause, he smiled, thanked them, and at her parents' insistence, put on the watch. Everything felt so strange, so irrational. Sipping her pumpkin juice, Amelia bit her lower lip and glanced at her parents. She secretly believed that their admiration for Atticus stemmed from a desire to see her and Atticus together. To Amelia, this notion was absurd. It seemed impossible that the renowned Atticus Blaine would fall for someone as obscure as her, a fake Auror from the security department without even a formal internship. Moreover, she harbored no feelings for Atticus beyond admiration. Another oddity was her father's sudden change in demeanor. He had always been strict about her interactions with boys, to the point where she had never had a formal relationship. Yet, after meeting Atticus, her parents seemed anxious about her future. Of course, this was all speculation before the dinner. Amelia anticipated that some topics might embarrass her, but her parents didn't mention her at all, as if she were invisible. That sport called Quidditch really challenged my understanding of wizards, Mr. Depp remarked, refilling Atticus's glass with a bottle of whiskey he had been saving. He then poured a half glass for Mrs. Depp, who rarely drank. The 3 of them toasted together, and Mr. Depp continued with a smile. I always thought wizards would be a cautious and secretive group, avoiding attention from ordinary people. Yet, you've developed such a thrilling sport. Amelia never quite mastered that magical subject, Mrs. Depp chimed in, her cheeks flushed from the alcohol. I remember in her 3rd year, she struggled to stay on a broom while one of her roommates made the Quidditch team. That summer, she asked us for a broomstick and insisted we take her to the field for practice. Do you remember that? Mr. Depp ignored his daughter's tense expression and continued cheerfully. She ended up hanging from a redwood tree, and the broom she just bought flew into the mountains. The tree was too high for me to climb, and she couldn't get down without using magic. Fortunately, we met a group of young people climbing the mountains. How about you, Atticus Blaine? Do you enjoy this sport? Atticus smiled and replied, I do, but I'm not very skilled at it. My reflexes are decent, but I can't seem to apply them to riding a broom. Of course, if it's just flying in a straight line, that's not a big problem. Mr. Det laughed heartily, as if he had heard a funny joke. Ha ha! Then I think it's a genetic problem. Amelia tightened her grip on her fork, feeling the urge to tell her father to shut up. Atticus, noticing her discomfort, turned to her gently. What's wrong, Amelia? You don't seem to have much of an appetite. Oh, don't worry about her, Atticus, Mr. Det interrupted with a wave of his hand, smiling. Let's continue our conversation. Amelia bit her lip and glanced at her mother, feeling a bit aggrieved. However, her mother didn't even look at her, instead joining the new topic with great interest. This cheerful atmosphere also put Atticus at ease. After all, if the Detours had shown any intention of recognizing their relatives at dinner, it would have made him uncomfortable. He had even considered using magic to intervene if such a situation arose. Let's take some pictures. The delightful meal lasted until 9 o'clock in the evening. After Mr. Det finished his drink, and before Atticus could say goodbye, he trotted to the living room to fetch the camera he had prepared. Mrs. Det also pulled the confused Amelia into the living room. However, they encountered a problem. There was no one else to take the pictures. If you don't mind, Amelia, I think you can help us, Mr. Det said, hesitating for a moment before handing the camera to Amelia, who had been silent all night. Oh, it doesn't have to be like this, Atticus quickly interjected, noticing the grievance in Amelia's brown eyes. A little magic can solve this problem. So, the four of them took dozens of photos in every possible spot in the house, and the Dieter couple were so excited that they were reluctant to stop. A full moon in the sky cast a vast brilliance, and high above, wisps of misty cold smoke revealed an ominous hue under the moonlight. Mrs. Det looked out the back window of the living room and exclaimed as if she had just noticed the time. Oh my gosh, it's so late! Without waiting for Atticus to say goodbye, she quickly ran into their bedroom on the first floor. Then, under Atticus's puzzled gaze, she returned with a set of neat, brand-new pajamas and handed them to him with a loving smile. I've tidied up the guest room upstairs, dear. There's a full set of toiletries in there. You should go to bed early. I'll prepare breakfast for you tomorrow morning. With that, she immediately helped her drunken, staggering husband into their room, leaving Atticus and Amelia standing awkwardly by the stairs, exchanging glances. The darkness before dawn enveloped the earth, and human activities were subdued by the laws of nature. In the Magic Capitol building of the United States, which operated day and night, only the occasional wizard took the elevator with a listless expression. The dim light illuminated the disorderly shelves. A wizard with light blonde hair lay snoring loudly at a messy desk. Suddenly, a wisp of cool wind with a biting chill swept through, disturbing the sleeping Chago's dream. He twisted his neck unconsciously, which only added to his discomfort. The strain on Atticus Blaine's shoulders and neck, caused by years of poor sleeping posture, was painfully evident. The unbearable soreness jolted him back to reality. He let out a groan, relaxing his furrowed brow. A shadow stretched from the desk, obscuring the candlelight that flickered across Atticus's face. This sudden darkness hastened his awakening. Blinking slowly, he gradually mustered the strength to push himself upright, a process that took nearly 2 minutes. Finally, he leaned back against the soft chair. "Who are you?" he exclaimed, panic rising as his vision cleared. But before he could fully voice his question, a flash of silver light pierced the dim room, silencing him forever. End of this chapter. Chapter 932. Arrested. Mr. and Mrs. Det had already left. Atticus Blaine stood at the foot of the stairs leading to the second floor, holding the brand-new set of pajamas Mrs. Det had just given him. Beside him was the silent Amelia. Atticus noticed the curiosity in Amelia's eyes, which was not surprising. The overly enthusiastic behavior of the Detours had finally made Amelia a bit suspicious, but he was confident that she hadn't guessed the truth of the matter. It wasn't something one could deduce with just a sharp mind and vivid imagination. Sure enough, Amelia tried to ease the awkwardness and find a suitable excuse for her parents' abrupt behavior. My parents like you very much, she said. I think it's because you're from London, and they spent most of their lives in that city. Your name also seems familiar to them. That makes sense, Atticus nodded thoughtfully. Could you please show me to the guest room? Amelia looked a bit surprised, as if she hadn't expected Atticus to agree to stay overnight. Once she realized it, she nodded, slightly embarrassed. Oh, of course. They ascended the stairs to the second-floor corridor. The two bedrooms were aligned on the side facing the road, while the bathroom and laundry room were on the opposite side. Amelia flicked on the corridor light and pointed to the bedroom at the end. That's the guest room, and if you need a shower... She gestured to the dimly lit room behind her, the door half closed. There's a bathtub you can use. Atticus tried to keep the atmosphere from becoming any more awkward. He nodded stiffly and replied calmly, Thank you. Is there anything else I should know? No. Oh, Amelia suddenly exclaimed. She darted into the dark bathroom without explanation. After the door slammed shut, there was a rustling sound, followed by a loud bang, likely the cabinet door closing. When Amelia reappeared, her face was flushed with embarrassment. It's the hot water heater. I fixed it. It doesn't work very well. I thought you might know how to use it, Mr. Blaine, since you grew up in a Muggle orphanage. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Of course I can handle no-mage technology, Atticus replied, his voice calm and steady. Once Amelia, who seemed eager to escape, had retreated into her bedroom and disappeared from view, Atticus allowed himself a small smile and shook his head. He decided not to shower immediately and instead headed to the guest room, pajamas in hand. Upon turning on the light, he found himself in a small room painted a soothing sky blue. The furnishings were simple, a bed, a wardrobe, and a few rows of shelves on the inner wall for sundries and books. Atticus walked to the bedside, bent down, and stroked the bedding. It was soft and carried the scent of sunshine, indicating that the Deters had aired it out in advance. Several magic books lay on the bedside table, likely belonging to Amelia. Perhaps the Deters had placed them there to keep him entertained. However, they didn't know much about magic, as the top book was a rather dull History of Magic in the American Magical Circle. The cover depicted the former address of the Magical Congress of the United States, located in Appalachia. The massive building in the mountain range still caught Atticus's attention. Atticus and Amelia didn't see each other again until bedtime, but he knew that when he entered the bathroom, Amelia was hiding behind her bedroom door. After Atticus Blaine closed the bathroom door, Amelia quickly emerged from her bedroom and tiptoed to the downstairs bathroom of Mr. and Mrs. Deter. By the time Atticus exited the bathroom, Amelia had already returned to her room. He glanced at her closed door and smiled silently, knowing that his elder had no intention of sleeping that night. Unlike Amelia, Atticus felt a rare sense of comfort and tranquility since arriving in New York. As he relaxed, fatigue washed over him. A gentle breeze nudged the half-open window, causing the curtains to flutter in a rhythmic dance. The full moon peeked through the gaps, casting a soft glow. The distant hum of cars on the main road 2 streets away added to the night's serenity, making it feel even more peaceful and prolonged. Everything felt so comfortable that Atticus imagined himself as an ordinary person, free from burdens. Before drifting into a deep sleep, a fleeting thought crossed his mind. It's nice to feel this way sometimes. However, Amelia was not as calm. In the dark room, she wrapped herself tightly in her quilt, her toes curled beneath it. Her pretty face was mostly hidden, with only her eyes and forehead exposed. Her gaze wandered through the room, bathed in weak moonlight, as she tried to avoid thinking about Atticus Blaine sleeping on the other side of the wall. She couldn't quite describe her feelings, perhaps a mix of shame, curiosity, and excitement. Why did her parents favor Atticus Blaine so much? Amelia couldn't help but ponder this question. To justify her parents' enthusiasm, she reluctantly concocted reasons for Atticus's presence. While they seemed reasonable, they didn't fully satisfy her. Perhaps her parents saw Atticus as a prominent figure in the wizarding world and hoped he could help them. This wasn't impossible, given her mother's regret at not being able to offer more assistance. Yet, like the reasons she had previously given Atticus, these were mere guesses. Amelia's thoughts drifted to the night of the poison leopard incident. recalling Atticus's peculiar behavior when he took her wand. There was a faint warmth emanating from it, a hint of joy, as if it recognized a relative. Unanswered questions tormented Amelia, keeping her awake as she tossed and turned. This restlessness persisted until the darkest hour before dawn. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from the living room below. In her half-conscious state, Amelia dismissed it as her father bumping into something on his way to the bathroom. But when similar sounds repeated dozens of times, she sat up in shock, realizing something was amiss. "Mom and Dad!" Amelia screamed, apparating downstairs in her pajamas. The scene in the living room made her face turn pale, and her body trembled uncontrollably. There stood an Auror from the security department, her colleague. Judging by the number of people present, it was clear that something serious was unfolding. The living room, though not cramped, was bustling with activity as at least half of the security department had gathered there. The green flames flickering in the fireplace added an eerie glow to the scene. Some individuals were forcefully opening doors and rushing out, seemingly to secure the perimeter of the house. Mr. and Mrs. Dett, the elderly couple residing there, were visibly startled by the commotion. Clinging to the bedroom doorframe, they watched in panic as the group of magicians appeared to have taken over their home. They were at a loss for what to do. Even Amelia was rendered speechless by the grave expressions on her colleagues' faces. Atticus Blaine gently patted her shoulder, offering a reassuring smile to the old couple before rising to his feet. He turned his attention to the competent-looking witch leading the group. "Tell me why you're here," he inquired calmly. The moment Atticus moved, the Aurors tensed up, their restraint giving way as they simultaneously drew their wands and aimed them at him. Clearly this was no trivial matter. Atticus's expression grew serious as he pondered the situation. Meanwhile, Amelia and her parents were frozen in fear, unable to react. "I'm terribly sorry," the witch began, her voice betraying a slight tremor despite her stern demeanor. Her fist, hidden within her sleeve, clenched tightly. Her tone, though rich, had taken on a sharper edge. "Atticus Blaine, you're under arrest." End of this chapter. Chapter 933, Protection Arrested. Amelia stood frozen, her mouth agape, staring at Atticus Blaine with a mix of confusion and fear. The elderly couple, Dett and his wife, hovered by the doorframe, their hands instinctively clutching their chests in worry. All eyes were on Atticus, the man whose resolve seemed unshakable. Despite the gravity of the news, Atticus remained unmoved, though a flicker of contemplation danced in his eyes. "What is your name?" Atticus inquired, directing his gaze toward the poised witch before him. Though Selina Hurd had no desire to respond, her body betrayed her will, answering before her mind could intervene. "Selina Hurd," she replied, her voice taut and her cheeks flushed with a mix of shame and frustration. She felt no admiration for Atticus Blaine, who was at this moment merely a suspect. Yet her involuntary response to his question left her feeling angry with herself. "Miss Hurd," Atticus continued, disregarding Selina's apparent disdain. His calm demeanor and steady voice seemed to ease the tension among those worried for him. "Since you claim I've been arrested, Makusa must provide a reason. What am I accused of?" This was a reasonable and lawful request, yet Selina remained silent. The male wizard beside her, with arched eyebrows, hesitated before stepping forward. Under Atticus's scrutinizing gaze, he appeared visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Blaine," the wizard began, "2 hours ago, there was a murder at the Capitol." As Atticus and Amelia listened intently, Ariel took a deep breath and continued, "Chago Piorio of the Wand Licensing Office has been confirmed deceased." "What?" Amelia gasped. "Chago is dead? But who could have done this?" Atticus turned to Amelia with a wry smile. Given the circumstances, it was clear whom Congress suspected. Was there any need for further questions? However, the mention of the Wand Licensing Office caused Atticus's brow to furrow slightly, his presence exuding an intensity that made the Aurors feel as if they were facing an enraged dragon, its fangs bared. "So, on what grounds do you suspect me of this murder?" Atticus asked, his voice steady. "Ariel," the wizard responded, "according to our investigation, Chago Piorio died in a fire, and—" He paused, gathering the courage to meet Atticus's calm gaze. "After the disturbance at the Wand Licensing Office was reported by a routine patrol officer, an alarm was raised. Mr. Graves, who was on duty, led a team to secure the area and investigate the scene. We discovered that something was missing from the office. What? Amelia, regaining her composure, moved closer to Atticus, her eyes wide as she stared at Ariel. The two wands sealed away by Mr. Atticus Blaine, Ariel replied, his expression grim. Li Huo, Atticus murmured, his eyes darkening. So, the wand licensing office only lost my wand, and no other facilities were damaged? The murderer demonstrated exceptional skill with the fire curse, Selena interjected coldly. We speculate that the murderer first subdued Chago Piorio, forcing him to reveal the wand's location. After obtaining the wand, they killed him with fire and escaped the capital. You suspect me of killing Chago to retrieve my wand? Atticus's lips curled into a smile that sent a chill down Selena's spine, a provocation she could not ignore. Based on the current evidence, you are the prime suspect, Mr. Blaine, Selena stated icily. Therefore, you must submit to questioning by the Ministry of Security and cooperate with the investigating in this dreadful murder case. Must. Atticus Blaine's eyes grew increasingly dangerous. You failed to take care of my wand. After it was lost, you didn't even apologize. Instead, Atticus glanced around the crowded living room, which was packed with people and offered little free space. His gaze fell on the Aurors, who became visibly tense under his scrutiny, their hands trembling as they gripped their staffs. He narrowed his eyes, then suddenly opened them wide. Crack! Zap! 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 A blinding, jagged lightning bolt flashed through the dim room. The Aurors, caught off guard, were momentarily blinded. Before they could comprehend what had happened, a powerful force materialized out of nowhere, sweeping through them. The wand was snatched from my hand. In panic, the Aurors instinctively retreated, scattering in search of cover. For a moment, chaos reigned in Amelia's living room. Atticus! Amelia screamed, unable to contain her fear. She was furious with her colleagues for barging into her home without solid evidence, but she was even more terrified of Atticus, who, feeling deeply insulted, might unleash his wrath. The oppressive weight of the deep sea seemed to envelop the room, and cracks spread ominously from Atticus's feet. A female Auror, who had maintained a businesslike demeanor moments before, dove behind the refrigerator for safety. However, the floor's tremors toppled the appliance, leaving her and Errol exposed to Atticus's icy stare. All the Aurors, including the two, were at a loss, unsure of their next move. Amelia's scream halted Atticus's hand mid-air. He turned to look at her, seeing fear and a plea in her eyes. The Dieter couple, standing in the doorway, were equally stunned. The elderly pair clung to each other, appearing on the verge of fainting. Snap, snap, snap! Atticus lowered his hand, and the dozens of wands he had confiscated fell to the ground. A suffocating silence ensued, and no Auror dared to speak until Atticus Blaine did. You can't take Atticus. Surprisingly, it was Mrs. Dieter who first overcame her fear. She rushed to Atticus's side, facing the Aurors from the security department with a determined, albeit confused expression. It's impossible for him to have killed anyone. He was asleep upstairs the entire time, and we can all vouch for it. That's right, Mr. Dieter quickly regained his composure and joined his wife, shouting angrily at the shaken Aurors. You've made a mistake. Someone stole Atticus's wand. Your negligence has caused him significant distress. You should be compensating for his losses and finding the thief, not barging into our home uninvited and persecuting an innocent man. Another silence fell over the room, and Atticus raised an eyebrow. The severity in his eyes softened slightly as he regarded the Dieters with a curious expression. Ma'am, sir, Selena Hild began, but before she could continue, Errol pulled her back, taking a deep breath before speaking earnestly. Even if you've seen Atticus Blaine in this house, it doesn't necessarily mean he hasn't left, especially when a powerful wizard like Mr. Blaine is involved. What did you see? You only saw. Errol glanced cautiously at Blaine again. Mr. Blaine, I apologize for our intrusion, but you do have a motive. We need to understand it to prevent further harm to the magical community in the United States. Atticus, however, paid little attention to what the Auror was saying. Atticus Blaine stood there, stammering slightly, as he gazed at the two elderly men before him, their gray hair and sagging skin a testament to their years. A peculiar sensation was brewing within him, a mix of unease and determination. The aurors present watched the young wizard by the stairs with bated breath, fully aware of the potential consequences if Atticus chose to resist, or worse, to teach them a lesson. Ural, swallowing nervously, attempted to reason with Atticus. He wanted to assure him that a thorough investigation would prove his innocence, that the Magic Congress would never dare to tarnish the reputation of such a distinguished wizard, the vice president of the International Confederation of Wizards. But before he could finish, Atticus interjected, "I'll stay at my hotel until this is cleared up." A collective sigh of relief swept through the dim and solemn living room. Ariel nodded gratefully at Atticus. "Thank you for your cooperation. Oh no, it's your support." He noticed Atticus's pajamas and added, "You can go change. Please take all your belongings with you. According to regulations, we need to check them. You may also have to search this house, as the wand, well, it would be better if you allowed us to retrieve our wands." Atticus paid no heed to the aurors from the security department. Instead, he turned to the elderly couple who watched him with concern. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this," he said. "Don't say that, dear." Mrs. Dett replied, blowing her nose and wiping her tear-filled eyes. "But how can we help you?" "Well, it's not me who actually needs help with this matter," Atticus reassured her. "Oh, of course," he continued, addressing Amelia. "Given the agreement we've just reached with the Magic Congress, it's best not to go out until this is resolved. So if it's convenient, could you please inform Remus? He's at the Goblin's place. Let him know not to worry." End of this chapter. Chapter 934, The Wiped Memory. The aurors from the security department had turned the house upside down, yet found nothing. This outcome was hardly surprising to them. If Atticus Blaine had indeed been responsible for the death of Chago Pio Leo, he certainly wouldn't have left his wand behind so carelessly. Mr. and Mrs. Dett huddled close to Amelia, watching the wizards who had left their home in disarray after Atticus's departure. They felt a mix of anger and panic. Amelia, observing the chaos with a pale face, began to question her dream of joining the security department for the first time. The morning light streamed through the living room's glass window like a soft melody, illuminating the room. The aurors finally calmed down. With a wave of their wands, they restored the house's furnishings to their original state and gathered in the living room. Without Atticus Blaine present, the aurors were noticeably more at ease. Selina nodded curtly to the Dett family seated on the sofa and exited through the fireplace, temporarily connected to the Flu network. Ariel seemed inclined to offer Amelia some words of comfort, knowing she would soon be their colleague. However, upon seeing Amelia's cold expression, he sighed inwardly and left without a word, hurrying through the fireplace. They still had to visit Blaine's hotel. The flickering green flames in the fireplace finally subsided, leaving a small flame burning in the ash-covered hearth, threatening to extinguish at any moment. Now, only the Dett family remained, and they exchanged no words about the recent events. Silence enveloped the room, broken only by Mrs. Dett's soft sobs. Mr. Dett's eyes were red as he gently stroked his wife's back. Amelia's delicate fists were clenched on her knees. She resented the security department for barging into her home without clear evidence and frightening her parents. Yet a trace of confusion lingered in her eyes, unsure of what to do next. "We have to help that child." Mrs. Dett, having moved past her initial fright and sadness, suddenly grasped her husband's hand. Her emotional instability was evident as she looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "We can't let anything happen to that child again, Atticus. If Benna knew we didn't protect her child, what would she say?" Veins bulged on Mr. Dett's thick arms, and he seemed to struggle for breath. His solemn face was etched with pain. "You're right, dear." Mr. Dett's voice was hoarse. "We have to do something. That kid Benna, if these bastards dare to hurt him, I swear I'll go to the Wizarding United Nations to sue them. Now, we need." It wasn't the United Nations of Wizards, but the International Federation of Wizards. Moreover, this organization didn't handle regular cases and had no authority to interfere in the internal affairs of various countries' ministries of magic. As for harming Atticus Blaine, Amelia believed Makusa wouldn't dare. Lynching the world's leading magician? That was unthinkable. Atticus Blaine was renowned as the most powerful wizard in the world. Besides his fame, he was the deputy principal of Hogwarts and deeply trusted by Albus Dumbledore. Amelia was certain that if news of Atticus's detention spread, it would cause an international uproar. The British Ministry of Magic would undoubtedly send a letter of inquiry, and Albus Dumbledore might even rush to New York in person. But Amelia didn't share this with her parents. Her attention was drawn to something else, something she sensed was crucial and could answer her doubts. Benna. Amelia raised her head, her beautiful brown eyes still clouded with confusion. Who is Benna? Benna's child. I don't understand. Mrs. Dett's response was awaited with bated breath. Dett's sobs abruptly ceased. When she regained her composure, she avoided her daughter's gaze, appearing deeply frightened. Mr. Dett pursed his lips, his arms trembling slightly. Tell me, Mom and Dad. Amelia suddenly stood up, her eyes wide as she stared at her parents, who stood side by side. Her voice carried a tone of distrustful anger. What are you hiding? Benna's child is Atticus Blaine, right? Do you know Atticus's mother, Bina? Confronted by their daughter's probing questions, they lowered their heads in shame. The living room was enveloped in silence, broken only by Amelia's increasingly heavy breathing. Yet the oppressive quiet did not linger. Golden pink sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting fragmented patterns across the room. Mr. Dett wiped his wet eyes with the back of his hand, his once straight back now stooped. He looked at Amelia with sorrow before turning to his wife, speaking in a hoarse voice. Amelia, I've been thinking about this for some time. We shouldn't keep it a secret. Mrs. Dett covered her face in anguish, her shoulders shaking more violently, yet she did not object. Amelia watched her father struggle to stand, feeling a pang of distress and instinctively wanting to help him. However, Mr. Dett waved her off and, with unsteady steps, retreated to his bedroom. A minute later, he returned, looking somber and holding a photo album. Its faded cover suggested a long history. For you, Mr. Dett said, his voice barely audible. Amelia examined the album, noting its yellowed, curled edges. Beneath the glass cover was a family photo. Judging by the attire and background, it seemed to be from a Christmas long past. Among the three people in the photo, one was unmistakably her. Yet, their expressions were cold and distant. Amelia recognized the other couple as her parents, though much younger, appearing to be in their 40s. Amelia glanced at her father, who seemed to have aged suddenly, and her mother, who wept silently. She then focused on the photo. When did we take this? But something's off. You're much younger, and She opened the album's hardcover and began to flip through the photos. It started with a young couple and a newborn in a photo studio. The couple beamed with joy while the baby cried loudly. Amelia held her breath as she continued to look. The couple and the baby aged in the photos. Initially, everyone smiled happily, their smiles growing brighter. However, after a certain point, the couple's smiles faded, and the girl, who looked remarkably like Amelia, appeared increasingly rebellious, sporting lip piercings, tattoos, colorful hair, and eccentric outfits. In the album's final pages, the warmth between the couple and the girl seemed to vanish, their eyes cold. Amelia noticed that although they stood close, they seemed to avoid touching each other. She closed the album, her fingertips brushing over its curled edges. Despite its age, the album was well cared for, free of dust in its folds and cracks. Who is she? Amelia asked, despair in her voice, as she looked at her silent parents. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the sycamore trees. Amidst the whispering leaves, Atticus Blaine, who had been silent for a while, raised his head and looked at his little daughter. His chapped lips moved slightly as he spoke. That's your sister. Her name is Belina Dett. Chapter 935, Meeting Dumbledore. Mr. and Mrs. Dett sat closely together on the living room sofa, with Amelia holding a photo album. As the light and shadows shifted around them, a somber story unfolded. The Detts, who had vowed never to revisit these memories, once again unearthed the deeply buried pain from their hearts. Amelia listened with a mix of emotions she had never experienced before. Though she had never met her sister, the story felt strangely familiar. Her father recounted the tale of Belina's rebellious youth, how she strayed from the right path and embarked on a journey of self-destruction. Belina's actions not only ruined her own life, but also affected those around her. As Amelia absorbed the story, she felt an uncanny connection, as if she were living a life parallel to her sister's. The conflict within the family had become irreconcilable. Neither side was willing to understand or forgive the other, leading to a complete breakdown of their relationship. Bernadette's story concluded on a cold, snowy day, devoid of warmth. Amelia awoke from the tale with a sense of horror. She wanted to chastise her parents for abandoning her sister, who had just given birth. But seeing the two elderly figures curled up in pain on the sofa, she swallowed her words. The ice between them had formed over years, not just a single day. She couldn't blame her parents entirely. Later, your mother and I made a decision, Mr. Dett began. We decided to leave London and start anew in another city. We wanted to escape the pain. Life in New York was peaceful, and a few years later, we had you. He looked at Amelia, whose face mirrored that of his eldest daughter, Belina. His emotions were as fragmented as his voice. I want to apologize, Amelia. In your early years, we were harsh on you. You resembled your sister so much that I thought it was a curse. But your mother and I didn't want to repeat our mistakes, so we were stricter with you than most parents. Amelia shook her head slightly, dismissing the importance of these past grievances. So, she asked, is Atticus Blaine the child my sister Belina brought back? I believe so, Mrs. Dett replied, blowing her nose. I felt a connection with him the moment I saw him. His name was Atticus, like his father. Your dad and I thought it was a coincidence, but when we heard you call him Blaine, sir, we realized something was amiss. What he told us about his background confirmed he is Belina's child, Mr. Dett added, wiping his eyes. Does Atticus know about this? Amelia asked, bewildered. Oh, I don't think he knows, Mrs. Dett said worriedly. He knows about his father, but nothing about Belina. He was taken away as soon as he was born. Overcome with emotion, Mrs. Dett covered her face, unable to continue. Amelia watched her mother, feeling no urge to comfort her. She pondered whether Atticus truly knew nothing. After all, the first thing this wise wizard did to gain fame was discover a secret chamber at Hogwarts that had remained hidden for centuries. He later thwarted numerous conspiracies and invented a remarkable alchemical tool, the learning machine. Suddenly, Amelia recalled her first encounter with Atticus at the immigration office. His expression had been one of shock upon seeing her. Mandy had assumed Atticus was captivated by her appearance, but perhaps there was more to it. Atticus had appointed her to oversee his supervision by the security department. Could it be that Atticus already knew everything? Atticus Blaine had already sensed something was amiss when he saw his reflection at the border, recognized his own face, and heard the name Dett. This realization was why he agreed to attend the family banquet the previous night and chose to stay overnight. In that moment, all his doubts vanished, and Amelia's heart felt as clear as a polished silver mirror. Yet the situation was utterly absurd. The astonishment and fear in Amelia's wide eyes were unmistakable. Could Atticus Blaine truly be her nephew? A wizard of global renown, celebrated for his extraordinary achievements, was related by blood to her, a young witch who had just graduated. No wonder Atticus had reacted so strangely when she touched her wand, and how he could wield it with such ease. Amelia's excitement was tempered by the memory of the predicament Atticus faced. A profound sense of guilt overwhelmed her. She felt remorseful for Atticus, who had grown up in an orphanage, deprived of a warm, loving family environment. In contrast, Amelia had a complete family, basking in the love and care of her parents. This stark disparity made her feel as though she had stolen the familial love that rightfully belonged to Atticus. Her breathing grew heavier, and her fair complexion flushed with a rosy hue. A powerful urge to help Atticus surged within her. Go to Graves? No, that won't work, she thought, recalling her previous attempts. I should go to Remus. He's Atticus's good friend and will know what to do. This is what Atticus asked me to do. I'm going to find Remus Lupin. He will know how to help Atticus, Amelia declared loudly, looking at her parents, who were still engulfed in their grief. I can't wait any longer. I don't know what will happen next. I have to hurry. Before Mr. and Mrs. Dett could respond, Amelia had vanished. Hearing movement upstairs, the couple set aside their sorrow and rushed to find Amelia, who had quickly changed clothes and used her wand to tie her shiny brown hair into a high ponytail. Mom and Dad, stay at home, and I'll keep you updated, she called out before disappearing once more. On her way, Amelia purchased a copy of The New York Ghost, which made no mention of Atticus being detained by the Magic Congress. Her eyes burned with determination, knowing the Ministry of Security had likely suppressed the news. Without such measures, the Woolworth building would be swarmed by reporters from around the globe by evening. After navigating several detours, Amelia finally located Remus. She had expected to find him in a meeting with officials from the International Magical Cooperation Department and various magical families. Instead, she discovered him in a small goblin hotel, which had been converted into an office space, with goblins bustling about with paperwork. A one-armed goblin led her to Remus's hospital bed. "Remus, what happened to you?" Amelia asked, shocked to see him lying there, looking exhausted and grim. She momentarily forgot about Atticus's situation. "An attack?" she inquired. "Oh, not exactly an attack," Remus replied weakly, gesturing toward a glass bottle on the bedside table. "I got so caught up in my work that I forgot. You probably know the full moon nearly caused a disaster last night. Fortunately, I'm accustomed to carrying wolfsbane potion with me. But you seem to be in a hurry, Amelia. Where's Atticus? You should be with him, right?" Amelia began to explain, her urgency evident in her voice, as Remus listened intently, his eyes gradually focusing on her words. Lying on the bed, Atticus Blaine's eyes gradually sharpened with determination. "What do you think we should do now, Remus?" Amelia asked anxiously, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Remus took a few deep breaths before responding. "Please help me up, Amelia. There's something only you can do." "What is it?" she interrupted, her curiosity piqued. "Go to Albus Dumbledore. You must tell him about Atticus," Remus instructed, his voice filled with urgency. With Amelia's assistance, Remus sat up weakly, his gaze fixed on her stunned expression. "Go immediately. The goblins have a way to get you to England, but be cautious. You know this is smuggling. Inform Albus of the situation and follow his guidance." End of this chapter. Chapter 936, Encounter. As time quietly slips into late April, the vibrant hues of spring begin to fade, signaling its end. At Hogwarts, the young wizards frolic on the lawns, noticing how the sun's reflection on the black lake grows increasingly dazzling. Bright, sunny days have become the norm. The second Triwizard Tournament concluded in late February, but it failed to meet expectations. For reasons unknown, it sparked little discussion. Even at Hogwarts, most students avoid talking about that day, as the events that abruptly halted the tournament weigh heavily on their minds, too burdensome for many to confront. The next Triwizard Tournament is scheduled for June, leaving a 4-month lull. For the students, this period without excitement is unbearable. Quidditch, the beloved sport, has re-emerged, albeit unofficially. The young wizards, brimming with energy, organize their own amateur matches. Since late March, small groups gather on the Quidditch field nearly every weekend. The professors, pleased to see the students releasing pent-up emotions, merely remind them to stay safe, refraining from further interference. On another sunny weekend, the brilliant sunlight rouses Harry, who stayed up late catching up on homework. He rubs his sleepy eyes and sits up on his 4-poster bed, noticing that, except for Ron, who is still sound asleep, the dormitory is empty. Relieved, Harry kicks off the blanket, gets out of bed, and opens the window to let in the refreshing breeze. From the high tower dormitory, faint cheers drift in, piquing Harry's curiosity. He retrieves his glasses from the bedside, and once his vision clears, he returns to the window. The noise emanates from the Quidditch pitch. "Oh!" Harry exclaims, eyebrows raised in surprise. He hadn't expected a game to be organized so early. "What's wrong, Harry?" a groggy voice asks from behind. Without turning, Harry replies, "There's a game going on. I thought we could check it out, Ron." "Oh, a game," Ron mumbles, squinting as he searches for his shoes. "But today is Hogsmeade's open day, isn't it? Hermione made plans with us. She said she needed to buy some new quills." "Oh," Harry blinks, suddenly remembering. "I forgot about that. Come on, Ron. Hermione must be waiting for us." Harry quickly changes into a clean set of clothes and rushes to the bathroom to freshen up. When he returns, Ron is still struggling to put on a t-shirt, his eyes half closed. "You need to hurry, Ron," Harry chides, sitting on the bed to put on his shoes. "Is dating Lavender more challenging than dodging a giant bludger?" "What are you talking about, Harry?" Ron snaps back to reality, his face flushing red. After dressing, he hesitates and says, I told you when I borrowed the invisibility cloak, didn't I? I just got hungry at night and wanted to get some food from the house elves. I see, Harry replies, standing up and tapping his feet on the floor. His sneakers feel tight, a reminder that he needs new ones. The invisibility cloak you lent me turned out to be quite useful. To the murmurs of discontent as they strolled through the bustling streets of Hogsmeade. The air was crisp, and the cobblestone paths were alive with the chatter of witches and wizards going about their day. Atticus Blaine, Hermione called out, her voice cutting through the din. Do you think the price hikes have anything to do with the ministry's recent policies? Atticus, who had been lost in thought, turned to her with a contemplative expression. It's possible, he replied, adjusting his glasses. The ministry's been making some questionable decisions lately. It wouldn't surprise me if their actions were affecting the economy. Ron, who was munching on a chocolate frog, chimed in. Well, whatever it is, it's making everything more expensive. Even the joke products at Zuko's are out of reach now. Hermione nodded, her brow furrowed with concern. It's not just about the prices, though. It's the uncertainty of it all. People are worried, and that kind of fear can spread quickly. As they ed their walk, the trio passed by the familiar sights of Hogsmeade, the quaint shops, the lively pubs, and the ever-popular shrieking shack in the distance. Despite the cheerful facade, there was an undercurrent of unease that seemed to permeate the village. Have you heard from Sirius lately, Atticus? Hermione asked, breaking the silence. Atticus shook his head, a hint of frustration in his voice. No, not since Voldemort's return. He's been keeping a low profile, and he warned me against using owls for communication. Too risky, he said. Ron sighed, tossing the chocolate frog wrapper into a nearby bin. It's like everything's changing, and not for the better. They made their way to the Three Broomsticks, where the warm, inviting atmosphere provided a brief respite from their worries. Over butterbeer and hearty sandwiches, they discussed their plans for the rest of the day. We should head back soon, Hermione suggested, glancing at her watch. I still have that essay for Professor Victor to finish. Atticus and Ron groaned in unison, but they knew she was right. With a final sip of their drinks, they gathered their things and prepared to leave. As they stepped back into the chilly afternoon air, the weight of the world seemed to settle back onto their shoulders. Yet, despite the challenges they faced, there was a sense of camaraderie between them, a shared determination to face whatever lay ahead together. And so, with renewed resolve, they made their way back to Hogwarts, ready to tackle the tasks and trials that awaited them. Atticus Blaine listened intently to the sounds around him, pondering their meanings, while Ron lamented over his dwindling pocket money. The sunny weather had finally graced Hogsmeade, and it seemed a shame not to enjoy the opening day. The trio supported each other as they climbed the hillside adjacent to the shrieking shack. Once at the top, they settled on the lush green grass, facing the gentle southwest breeze, and spread out the candies and snacks they had bought for a picnic. Harry and Ron animatedly discussed Krum's reenactment of the Wronski Feint during last weekend's Quidditch match, while Hermione retrieved her copy of The Little League from her school bag and continued reading The New York Spectre. Time slipped away in the pleasant atmosphere, and as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, its golden rays mingled with streaks of red. Harry and Ron were playfully tussling over the last bag of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, while Hermione watched them with a mix of amusement and exasperation. Suddenly, a loud boom echoed through the howling wind, not far behind them. Instantly alert, Harry and Ron sprang to their feet, and Hermione swiftly drew her wand, pointing it at the figure that had materialized in the hazy air. The newcomer was a girl, seemingly around Percy's age, with a fair complexion, beautiful chestnut hair, and strikingly clear eyes. Her features were both clear and stunning. As she shook off her dizziness, she realized she was facing 3 wands aimed directly at her. Just as she was about to react, the green-eyed boy opposite her shouted sharply, "Don't move, or we'll attack. Who are you, and why are you here?" End of this chapter. Chapter 937, The Challenge of Building Trust. Amelia felt a wave of panic wash over her. It wasn't the fact that 3 young wizards were pointing their wands at her that unsettled her. It was the stern warning from Remus that echoed in her mind. He had advised her to keep a low profile upon entering the country, as her entry was illegal. If the Ministry of Magic discovered her presence, the consequences would be severe. She hadn't anticipated such bad luck, being discovered by locals almost immediately upon her arrival in the UK, before she even had a chance to conceal herself. Hermione gazed at the strikingly beautiful girl who had suddenly appeared before them, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. Ever since Voldemort's return, they had maintained a heightened state of vigilance, ready for any serious incidents. Yet, the days had passed uneventfully, and the Ministry of Magic's efforts to maintain a facade of peace had lulled them into a false sense of security. Otherwise, they wouldn't have ventured away from the crowd to the top of a remote mountain. But who was this girl? Hermione frowned, trying to piece it together. The girl didn't seem much older than Percy, perhaps a year or two, and she was undoubtedly a wizard. This suggested they might have crossed paths at Hogwarts. Hermione's eyes flickered with recognition. The girl's face seemed familiar. "I mean no harm," Amelia said, her voice tinged with anxiety. She had already caught sight of the imposing black castle perched on the distant cliff. "Hand over your wand first," Harry demanded in a low voice. His recent experiences, training and confronting Voldemort once more, had matured him significantly. The gravity in his voice carried an intimidation that made Amelia's heart race. Were all young wizards at Hogwarts this formidable? It was, after all, one of the oldest and most prestigious magic schools in the world, the very school where Atticus Blaine worked. A fleeting sense of awe passed through Amelia, but she quickly dismissed these thoughts. Her priority was to extricate herself from this situation with the three young wizards. The wind tousled Harry's black hair, revealing the lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. In a moment of surprise, Amelia blurted out, "Are you Harry Potter?" Harry's green eyes reflected a hint of resignation. His scar was a well-known identifier, and he had grown accustomed to the attention it brought. Initially, it had made him uncomfortable, but over the years, he had learned to cope with it. Harry's indifference only heightened Amelia's distress. She couldn't risk drawing her wand and engaging in a duel with the renowned Harry Potter and his friends. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her mind. She glanced at the villages and towns below the mountain, formulating a plan. "Why should I tell you my name?" Amelia asked, her voice steady as she met Harry's gaze. "Isn't that my right to privacy? Unless, of course, you're Aurors from the Ministry of Magic?" This question caught Harry off guard. They had no authority to demand her name or question her presence in the wilderness. They weren't law enforcement. However, the unexpected appearance of this stranger had triggered Harry's instinct to suspect a potential threat from Voldemort's followers. "You look suspicious, don't you?" Harry retorted. "Normal wizards wouldn't be here. If they wanted to visit Hogsmeade, they'd head down the mountain." "That's exactly what I intended," Amelia replied. "I just landed off course. If there's nothing else, I need to leave. I'm sorry to disturb your picnic," Amelia said, placing her hands in a visible position to show Harry Potter and his friends that she meant no harm. She began to slowly back away. Harry was unsure how to handle the situation. This girl didn't seem like an ordinary Death Eater. If she truly intended to leave, he saw no reason to stop her. "You're an American wizard!" Hermione's sudden exclamation startled Harry and caused Amelia to pause in her retreat. "You're from Makusa, aren't you?" Hermione asked, her eyes wide with sly surprise. "Makusa?" Harry echoed, taking a step back. His wand remained at the ready, but he whispered, "What is that?" "It's the Magical Congress of the United States of America. Their version of the Ministry of Magic," Hermione explained quickly. She glanced at Amelia, then deftly used her foot to retrieve her school bag from the ground. From it, she pulled out a copy of the New York Ghost she'd been reading. The cover featured a report on Atticus Blaine and Remus attending a joint review meeting on learning machines organized by Makusa. The photo showed the two alongside senior Congress officials, Track Graves and Marcel White, with Amelia standing behind Graves, her face partially obscured. "Look," Hermione said urgently, pointing at the image. Ron, who had turned away, leaned in to see. "It's her, behind this man. She's looking at Professor Blaine and Remus." Amelia hadn't expected that a young witch from a distant magical world would subscribe to the New York Ghost, let alone recognize her from such an obscure photo. She was taken aback by Hermione's perceptiveness. However, the real issue was that her identity had been discovered. Did she really have to confront these three young wizards? Amelia pursed her lips, resisting the thought. But what if Harry Potter and his friends spread rumors? Suddenly, Amelia's eyes widened, and she addressed Harry, who was muttering to himself. "Do you know Remus?" "What's so strange about that?" Ron interjected dismissively. "Remus is a friend of ours. He was our Defense Against the Dark Arts professor." "Friend?" Amelia blinked, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. Harry lowered his wand slightly, his tone softening. "You're from the United States Ministry of Magic. Okay, but why are you here? And do you know Professor Blaine and Remus?" Realizing she might not easily shake off these three young wizards, Amelia nodded. "Yes, of course. I know Atticus and Remus. When they were in New York, I was responsible for their safety. As for why I'm here, how can you prove you're Remus's friends?" Remus and Harry's father were classmates and friends at Hogwarts. He became a professor there to protect Harry, Hermione explained after a moment's thought. "We spent last Christmas with Remus and Sirius." Amelia's eyes flickered with understanding. If that were true, it indicated an unusual relationship between Harry and Remus. "In fact, it was Remus who asked me to come to Hogwarts," Amelia said cautiously. "Under orders from Remus?" Harry and his friends exchanged glances. Hermione frowned and asked, "What did he ask you to do? They should be back, right? I read in the newspaper that they've reached a cooperation with the American wizarding community." "The situation is much more complicated than that," Amelia replied, her voice more relaxed. She looked at Hermione and continued, "Remus asked me to meet with Albus Dumbledore and deliver some information." "What's the message?" Harry insisted, his curiosity piqued. However, Amelia remained resolute, shaking her head with a hint of anxiety in her eyes. "I'm sorry, but it's a secret. I can only reveal it when I meet Albus Dumbledore. You both seem to be students at Hogwarts, correct? If I were to ask you to deliver a message to Mr. Dumbledore on my behalf, would you be willing to help?" End of this chapter. Chapter 938, Finally Meeting. Amelia was eager to see Professor Dumbledore. Harry and his friends had the means to take her directly into Hogwarts, but they were cautious. Trusting a stranger with unknown intentions to use a secret passage into the school was not something they would do lightly. However, Amelia claimed familiarity with Professor Atticus Blaine and Remus, and she was following Remus's instructions on her journey. This convinced them to help her. The trio escorted Amelia to the foot of the mountain. Harry and Hermione flanked her, while Ron used the secret passage in Honeyduke's candy shop to report the news to Hogwarts. As dusk approached, the temperature began to drop. The mountains were bathed in a red afterglow, with wisps of clouds and smoke drifting through them, giving the Green Mountains a ghostly appearance. The dark green Forbidden Forest swayed in the wind, creating waves in the sunset. The surface of the Black Lake resembled countless shattered pieces of a silver mirror, its scattered light still dazzling. From the fields to the village entrance, Hogsmeade villagers, weary from their day's work, formed a long queue as they headed home. Amelia, disguised by a disguise charm, watched them until they disappeared into the distance. The sight of the Black Castle ahead made her heart throb. Compared to bustling New York, this place was primitive and backward, yet it held an extraordinary power that touched her deeply. A sudden sadness washed over her. If her parents hadn't left London, she would have been a student at Hogwarts. If those tragic events hadn't occurred, she might never have been born. Though he couldn't see it, Harry's keen intuition sensed Amelia's sadness. He glanced at her thoughtfully. "Why didn't Remus come back himself, and instead asked you to deliver the message? Don't you use owls over there?" "Owl?" Amelia, lost in her thoughts, snapped back to reality. "Of course we use owls for letters, but Remus thought it was too slow, so he asked me to come. As for why he didn't return, you know." "It was a full moon yesterday, Harry," Hermione interjected, glancing at Amelia. "I guess Remus is weak right now, so he couldn't make the trip." "Amelia Dett," Amelia introduced herself. "You can call me Amelia." "Hermione Granger," Hermione quickly responded, hesitating slightly, looking uneasy. "Professor Blaine is in trouble, isn't he?" Harry was taken aback and looked at Hermione, ready to question her, but Amelia spoke first. her voice tinged with unease. "Why do you ask that, Miss Granger?" After a pause, Hermione explained. "Normally, if Remus encounters trouble, he seeks Professor Blaine's help. They go out together, don't they? Unless Professor Blaine is facing something himself." It was a simple deduction, but not one many would make. Amelia, often praised for her intelligence at Ilvermorny, recognized Hermione Granger's extraordinary insight, yet she remained silent, which was enough for Hermione to confirm her suspicion. Harry and Hermione didn't wait long for Ron. Instead, they were met by Professor McGonagall, who appeared in a flash of fire with Fawkes perched on her shoulder, startling the nearby villagers, including Harry. Professor McGonagall's lips were pursed tightly, ways indicating the gravity of the situation. Professor McGonagall's gaze fell upon Harry and Hermione, filled with blame and disappointment. Instantly, they straightened up, their expressions turning solemn. They were acutely aware of what had displeased Professor McGonagall. "You should count yourselves lucky, Mr. Potter, Miss Granger," Professor McGonagall said sternly. "I'm relieved you didn't encounter a dark wizard. I hope this is the last time you act so recklessly, or it will be your last visit to Hogsmeade this semester." Harry and Hermione nodded eagerly, understanding the gravity of her words. "Now, where is the lady?" Professor McGonagall adjusted her glasses perched on her thin nose and scanned the area with her sharp eyes. "Oh, I'm right here, Professor," came a soft voice. Amelia, feeling the weight of the stern professor's presence, instinctively adopted the demeanor of a student. Professor McGonagall looked surprised at the empty space between Harry and Hermione. "An impressive disillusionment charm," she remarked. "You may remain in this state until you reach Albus's office to have it lifted." She extended her hand, and Harry and Hermione quickly placed theirs on top. After a moment's hesitation, Amelia did the same. A brilliant burst of fire enveloped them, and they vanished from the sight of the surrounding villagers. Even with her eyes closed, Amelia couldn't help but be dazzled by the brilliance. When her vision cleared, she found herself in a spacious, circular office filled with intriguing objects. However, none captured her attention as much as the old wizard with a silver beard who stood behind a delicate desk, his smile both breathtaking and welcoming. Albus Dumbledore, celebrated as the greatest wizard of their time, was a living legend. Amelia's mind swirled with excitement, almost overwhelming her. Every book on modern wizards mentioned his extraordinary achievements. "Please, don't be alarmed, ma'am," Dumbledore said kindly. Though Amelia was still under the disillusionment charm, his keen eyes behind half-moon glasses found her face with ease. "I assure you, you are quite safe in my office." "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Dumbledore. I forgot." Amelia stammered, quickly dispelling the charm. "Please, have a seat," Dumbledore offered, waving his wand. Several chairs materialized from thin air. Harry was surprised to see that Dumbledore had also provided chairs for them, indicating they were not being dismissed. "Mr. Weasley informed me." Dumbledore nodded towards Ron, who had just sat down and was now looking flustered. Dumbledore's gaze shifted to Amelia, his eyes twinkling. "Remus has a message for you. But of course, if you're weary from your journey, we could share a meal here in the office." "Oh no, Mr. Dumbledore," Amelia replied, feeling the pressure despite Dumbledore's kind demeanor. "The situation is urgent." She took a deep breath to steady herself. "Atticus Blaine, a professor from your school, has been imprisoned by the Makusa Security Department." A heavy silence fell over the room. Even the portraits of former headmasters on the walls ceased their whispering, all eyes on Amelia as they absorbed the shocking news from the American magical world. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a loud clatter. Hermione stood abruptly, her face pale, knocking her chair over in her haste. Harry and Ron quickly followed suit, their expressions mirroring Hermione's distress. Dumbledore remained silent, though the light in his eyes had dimmed. Professor McGonagall rose from her seat, her face a mask of concern. 3 students stood before her, their thin bodies swaying slightly. "You mean Atticus Blaine was imprisoned by Makusa?" Professor McGonagall asked, her face a mixture of astonishment and disbelief. "For what reason?" "Because Makusa suspects." Amelia exhaled heavily, her voice tinged with anger, that a murder recently committed within the Magic Congress was done by Atticus. End of this chapter. Chapter 939, The Whole Story and Arrangement. Could Professor Blaine have committed murder? Harry blinked his green eyes, a mix of surprise and anger swirling within them. He couldn't believe that Professor Blaine's hands were stained with innocent blood. The professor had only ever targeted dark wizards guilty of heinous crimes. It was unthinkable that he would kill indiscriminately. Dumbledore appeared deep in thought. The description alone suggested something was amiss, but he refrained from jumping to conclusions. Instead, he maintained his composure and asked politely, "So, why is Atticus considered a suspect?" Amelia's anger clouded her thoughts, making it difficult for her to recount the events in an organized manner. She focused on the most crucial details. The murdered wizard was from the Parliamentary Wand Licensing Office. The Auror's preliminary investigation determined he died from the fire curse. Atticus's wand, which had been confiscated, was missing from the scene. When Atticus entered the country, Track Graves, head of the Department of Security, deemed him dangerous and refused to issue a wand permit, confiscating his wand. Harry wanted to question why Graves considered Professor Blaine dangerous, especially since the professor had saved nearly 100,000 wizards during the Quidditch final. However, a glance at Dumbledore's solemn expression kept him silent. "Is that the reason?" Professor McGonagall's sharp voice was laced with anger. "That's why Atticus was detained? With all due respect, ma'am, wasn't your security department too hasty in exercising its authority? What does death by fire prove? And as for Atticus's wand being stolen, do they suspect he committed murder to retrieve it? This is absurd. Why not consider that a dark wizard coveted Atticus's power and seized the opportunity to take his wand? To me, Atticus is a victim. Your Ministry of Magic failed to safeguard his wand, causing him significant loss, and imprisoned him based on mere speculation without reliable evidence. This is utterly unacceptable." Professor McGonagall's chest heaved with indignation. "It's total nonsense." "Even stupid Fudge wouldn't do this," Ron muttered under his breath. Amelia was embarrassed by the professor's accusations, yet she had no defense. The Ministry of Security's actions left her feeling deeply ashamed. Dumbledore remained calm and composed. He asked for Amelia's name. "So, Amelia, were you present when Atticus was arrested?" Upon receiving a positive response, he inquired further, "Didn't Atticus defend himself or provide evidence to prove he wasn't at the murder scene?" "No," Amelia shook her head. "He did ask the Aurors why he was being arrested, and then he followed them back to the hotel." Professor McGonagall frowned at this, and Hermione, who had been the first to rise, blinked in confusion. Everyone in the office was close to Atticus and familiar with his character. None of them believed he would be intimidated by a group of Aurors. The grounds for arrest were riddled with errors, and even they could see the flaws. With Atticus's intelligence, it was impossible for him to be speechless. There had to be more to the story. "Albus," Professor McGonagall called softly, looking at Dumbledore. "I can't make an accurate judgment at the moment, Minerva, unless—" Dumbledore turned his blue eyes to Amelia. "I can gather more information." "Of course, Mr. Dumbledore. I will tell you everything I know." Amelia replied firmly, understanding his intent. Thus began a long narrative. Amelia recounted the first time she met Atticus Blaine and Remus at the immigration office, detailing her experiences with them and the various situations they encountered. She shared everything about her relationship with Atticus, except for the matters she was unwilling or unable to disclose at the moment. As she spoke, the portraits on the walls began to whisper, and the few living souls in the office, aside from her and the esteemed Dumbledore, gradually displayed expressions of surprise. Atticus's absence from Hogwarts had been brief, merely over 10 days. Yet, in this short span, he had already embarked on numerous remarkable adventures in the American wizarding world. "I suspect there's a conspiracy, Albus," Professor McGonagall exclaimed half an hour later, as Amelia, parched from her storytelling, finally concluded. "Perhaps an accomplice of the vampire took Atticus's wand out of revenge." We all agreed that Atticus would not take an innocent life to retrieve his wand. Dumbledore nodded slightly, sharing his thoughts. "Based on what Amelia has told us, I don't believe Atticus would be able to reclaim his wand under these circumstances. Is there anything for which I need my wand?" "But how can we help him?" Amelia asked anxiously. "If the murderer is never caught, Atticus will always be under suspicion. Graves is biased against a powerful wizard like Atticus. Dumbledore raised a hand to halt Amelia's words. Her urgency and concern brought a peculiar glint to his eyes, and he rose from his chair. Based on what I know about Atticus, Amelia, he said calmly, he would not place himself in such a disadvantageous position unless being monitored aligned with his plan. What is Atticus planning, Albus? Professor McGonagall inquired. Unfortunately, I cannot make an accurate judgment, Minerva, Dumbledore replied, but I trust that Atticus can ensure his own safety, even without a wand. Dumbledore stepped out from behind his desk and, under everyone's watchful eyes, approached Fawkes, who perched on a golden branch. Of course, we must remain vigilant. If Atticus truly needs assistance, someone should be ready to help him. So, I'm sorry, Fawkes. I need you to fetch someone for me. Fawkes blinked his beautiful ruby eyes a few times before vanishing in a burst of flame. Mr. Dumbledore, Amelia began, understanding Dumbledore's intentions. He believed Atticus had a plan, which was why he remained at the hotel. Dumbledore intended to send someone back to the United States with her to find an opportunity to meet Atticus and inquire about the situation. However, if you want to send someone back to New York with me, you know wizards need approval to enter the United States. I'm afraid we don't have that much time. Oh, please don't worry, Dumbledore replied with a cheerful smile. I believe the person I've summoned has a way to conceal himself without being detected. Hermione's eyebrows twitched slightly, and she instinctively glanced at Harry. In the next moment, a brilliant flash of fire appeared in Dumbledore's office, and Sirius emerged from the flames with a solemn expression. End of this chapter. Chapter 940, Immediate Regulations. What's going on, Dumbledore? You sent Fawkes to me, saying there was something important. Sirius exclaimed as he stepped out of the firelight, surrounded by Fawkes. Thank God, there's finally something I can do to help. You know, I'm completely obsessed with... Oh, you three in the ministry right now? Upon seeing Harry in the office, Sirius's face lit up with joy, but his expression quickly shifted to one of concern. His eyebrows raised, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Are you in trouble again? Harry's face darkened, feeling that Sirius was becoming less endearing than before. However, before he could respond, Sirius approached with a grin, enveloping Harry in a tight embrace. The hug was so forceful that Harry had to swallow his retort. It wasn't until Harry was nearly out of breath that Sirius released him, placing his hands on Harry's shoulders and examining him closely. Satisfied, Sirius ruffled Harry's hair vigorously before turning his attention to the situation at hand. So, who can tell me? Oh, who are you? Sirius asked, noticing everyone in the room was familiar, except for one person, Amelia. He looked at the striking young woman with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Hello, Mr. Black. My name is Amelia Dett, from Makusa. Amelia introduced herself. She had recognized Sirius immediately. His escape from Azkaban had caused quite a stir, prompting many local wizards in the UK to flee, some even to the United States, where they criticized the Ministry of Magic's incompetence. This incident piqued the curiosity of the American wizarding community, with the New York Ghost frequently quoting the Daily Prophet. The subsequent revelation that Sirius Black, once thought to be the top henchman of the wizard who must not be named, was innocent and a tragic hero, was even more shocking. At the time, Amelia was still a student at Ilvermorny, where debates raged over whether Sirius's imprisonment was due to his own fault or his fearless nobility. After a moment's hesitation, Sirius nodded to Amelia, his eyes widening in surprise as he realized something. Wait a minute. The Magical Congress of the United States of America? But I haven't heard about anyone from there in the ministry? I'm afraid we don't have much time to chat, Sirius, Dumbledore interjected seriously. Miss Amelia, Det has brought us some information about Atticus Blaine. Atticus? Sirius's face was a mix of astonishment and concern. Isn't he in New York with Remus? I received a letter from him a few days ago. What happened to him? Dumbledore glanced at Amelia before recounting what she had just told them, simplifying and omitting some minor details. Initially, Sirius's expression shifted from surprise to joy as he listened intently. However, by the end, when he heard that Makusa had deployed nearly all its aurors to surround Amelia's family, seemingly preparing for a confrontation with Atticus, Sirius was both shocked and furious. "How dare Makusa do this?" he exclaimed. "Indeed, their boldness surprised me as well," Dumbledore replied, his voice deepening. Fortunately, Atticus was not imprisoned. Amelia informed us that he returned to his hotel in New York and decided to stay put for the time being. Thoughts flickered in Dumbledore's blue eyes as he paused momentarily before continuing. "I believe Atticus is aware that someone is orchestrating a conspiracy. By remaining in the hotel, he stays under the Auror's surveillance, potentially avoiding further plots against him and forcing the Magic Council to turning their backs. Additionally, I suspect Atticus might not know who actually took his wand and could be creating an illusion. At the very least, he's unaware of the person's intentions, so he decided to remain calm and observe the situation." Sirius frowned, having listened to Dumbledore's speculation, yet he found it difficult to accept. "Based on what I know about Atticus, if Fudge dares to send the Auror office to his doorstep, he would undoubtedly tie everyone up and send them back to the Ministry of Magic. That's because Makusa is not the Ministry of Magic, and Atticus will not recklessly start a war with a magical community in another land." Dumbledore suddenly raised his voice, looking at Sirius sternly. "Atticus mentioned to me the importance of his and Remus's workshop, and he went to New York this time to secure more support. He had to ensure that the cooperation was not jeopardized. Remus has temporarily lost the ability to move, and Atticus has temporarily lost his wand. We cannot let Atticus face this problem alone. If he has any plans, someone needs to execute them. So, I called you here. I hope you will follow Amelia to New York, but you must exercise restraint, Sirius, and obey Atticus." Sirius's expression was slightly sinister, and he seemed unconvinced, but in the end, he didn't argue and simply nodded. Then, Dumbledore nodded with satisfaction. He looked at Amelia and was about to say something, but suddenly caught a glimpse of the hazy darkness outside the window. He hesitated and turned to Professor McGonagall. "Amelia is not suitable to appear in front of students, Minerva. She has traveled such a long way. Can you prepare a resting place and food for her?" Professor McGonagall nodded and looked at Amelia with a smile. Although this girl came from Makusa, she was willing to smuggle herself to Hogwarts to deliver messages for Atticus, which made her like her even more. "Thank you, Mr. Dumbledore," Amelia said gratefully, but she still refused. "But I'm afraid I can't wait until tomorrow morning to leave. If possible, I hope to leave immediately. The security department, Graves, may find me at any time to learn about the situation. If he discovers that I have left New York, it will be troublesome." This reason was indeed sufficient, and Dumbledore couldn't argue. He looked at Sirius. "I'm fine with that, Dumbledore." Sirius stood up. "I have already asked for leave from the Ministry. Given the current situation, Fudge hopes that I will stay away from his Ministry of Magic. Moreover, I also hope to see Atticus as soon as possible." "In that case," Dumbledore no longer hesitated, "I asked Fawkes to take you back to New York, but the distance is too far, and we can't reach New York in one go. I'm afraid we'll have to rest along the way." Amelia and Sirius nodded simultaneously. Harry looked at Sirius, who had just arrived and was about to leave, and opened his mouth but said nothing. He understood the urgency of the matter. With a sudden burst, a few flickering embers slowly fell to the ground, and Amelia and Sirius vanished from the office. "Albus!" Professor McGonagall looked worriedly at the spot where the two had disappeared and called softly. "Don't worry too much, Minerva." Dumbledore's voice remained calm and steady, full of reassuring power. "You know Atticus. With his wisdom and ability, he is more than capable of handling any crisis." Dumbledore then turned his gaze to Harry and his friends. His eyes met Harry's, and he breathed a sigh of relief, speaking kindly. "Harry, Ron, Hermione, it seems you have unintentionally played a crucial role." Harry and his friends wore serious expressions, accustomed to such surprises landing at their doorstep. "Of course, I also trust that you understand the importance of keeping this matter confidential," Dumbledore continued. "Right?" Dumbledore said, his voice gentle and understanding. He didn't blame them for stepping away from the crowd, which brought a sense of relief to Harry. Eager to show his understanding, Harry nodded quickly. "Then go and enjoy a delicious dinner," Dumbledore continued with a warm smile, his tone inviting and kind. End of this chapter.